world abandons Americans. And what got me started on this was last weekend I was watching TV, and I guess I was in a curmudgeonly mood because I was like questioning everything. What? You know, how can they? And suddenly this commercial comes on for a company that buys life insurance policies. And there's this older couple in the commercial, and one of them says, you know, to the camera, or says to the other, you know, we learned that we could sell our policy when a friend did so to pay their medical bills. And I'm going, wait a minute. We're the richest country in the world. The richest billionaires in the world. We have more money than anybody. I mean, we got more money than God. It's just, the United States is a fabulously rich nation. And senior citizens are having to sell their life insurance policies, depriving their children of any kind of inheritance or you know, benefit, you know, help at all, just to stay alive, just to pay their medical bills. And you know, I thought this isn't right. You know, you don't have people having to sell their life insurance policies in Taiwan or in South Korea or in Japan or in Costa Rica or in any of the European Union countries, because the total number of people who went bankrupt because somebody got sick in those countries is zero. It's 500,000 people every year in the United States. So I'm looking at this ad going, wow, this is really an ad about how sick and dysfunctional America's, you know, our healthcare system is. Why is that? In fact, you know, I posted this over at HartmannReport.com, and one of the people who reads our newsletter posted a reply saying that he's recovering from COVID and has been binge-watching TV, and he's been binge-watching Breaking Bad. And it's been a long time since Breaking Bad was a hot thing, you know. But the premise is that this guy had cancer. This high school science teacher, he had cancer, and he needed a lot of money to pay for his treatment. Because this is America, right? And we don't have a national health care system. And so he started cooking meth to pay for his cancer treatment. It's just, you know, it's, how do we miss this stuff, right? Then another ad comes out for a company that sells reverse mortgages. Now, you know, Tom Selleck, I'm sure, is a very nice guy, but are there really that many seniors who are now destitute and thus must wipe out the largest store of their wealth and their children's inheritance just to retire? Then came an ad for the Shriners Hospital for Children. And, you know, they're doing wonderful work, right? Taking care of kids who are born with birth defects and deformities. But why are we crowdsourcing health care for children in crisis? Why isn't that just like routinely provided for with our tax dollars? And then there was this ad for Danny Thomas's hospital, you know, the one that he started. And now this one is dealing with kids with cancer, and they're doing a lot of great cancer research, and God bless them. But again, why aren't we all funding stuff like this? Why do we need this in the richest country in the world? I mean, why don't we just have billionaires pay their income taxes? Oh, that's right. Since the Reagan Revolution, billionaires no longer pay income taxes for all practical purposes. And then that ad was followed by another one for colostrum. It's a milk product that is supposed to boost your immune system. And the ad's pitch lady said something like, there are over 90,000 chemicals in our environment that haven't been tested for toxicity. And damn, I thought she's right. Most of the developed world uses the precautionary principle. You've got to prove something's safe before you put it in our food supply. That's how it works in Europe. But here in the United States, you don't have to prove anything. You just pour it on, you know, dump it in the air, put it in the water, put it in their food. You know, line the packages that we get our take-home food with PFAS chemicals. No big deal. We'll just, you know, we'll continue poisoning people until finally we get sued. That's how it works in America. It's the libertarian strategy. I mean, watch Dark Waters, you know, the movie with Mark Ruffalo, if you want to see how this works, how the DuPont poisoned an entire community. And then in the next commercial break, Jeff Bridges comes on. He's a great guy. He's a great actor. And he's pitching a charity called No Kid Hungry, which turns out is a very, you know, it's a high-quality charity with a really good rating. But again, why do we have kids who are hungry in America? 1 in 5 American children is either suffering from hunger or malnutrition right now in the richest country in the world. It costs us an estimated $167 billion a year because of the damage that's being done to the brains and bodies of these kids. It costs us $167 billion a year, and the total cost to end all childhood poverty in the United States is or hunger in the United States is $25 billion. The amount of money that Musk, Bezos, Gates, and Zuckerberg added to their money bins just since 2020 is over $300 billion. We could end childhood poverty in the United States with $25 billion. But, you know, we could save $167 billion with a $25 billion investment, but we don't because it would require billionaires to pay their taxes. And how did we get there? How did we get to this point? Well, it's because 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court legalized bribery. They legalized corporate bribery in 1978 with the Bellotti decision. They legalized basically all political bribery in 2010 with Citizens United. And of course, in 76, there was Buckley versus Vallejo. And the result of that is that, well, here, this is Judd Legum's newsletter today, popular.info. The average American family last year, in 2020, paid an effective tax rate of 13.6%. That's average, right? Some people paying a whole lot, some people paying nothing at all. So the average was 13.6%. General Electric reported $7 billion in profits last year. They got a refund of $423 million. They didn't pay taxes on their profits. They got a refund. T-Mobile reported $10 billion in profits last year. They paid $42 million in federal income taxes, 0.4%. Tesla, $3.2 billion in profits. They paid $48 million in federal income taxes, 1.5%. In 2020, quote, 55 of the largest corporations in America paid no federal corporate income taxes, despite enjoying substantial pre-tax profits in the United States. So what does this have to do with the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court said that if you're rich or if you're a corporation, you can buy your very own politician. And those politicians then will introduce legislation to make sure that you never have to pay taxes. I mean, this is where we're at now. We've got, you know, the rich getting richer. We are now the most unequal society in the developed world. And it's all because 5 corrupted billionaires on the U.S., or 5 corrupted Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court, who were being spiffed by billionaires, buying them vacations, buying them homes for their parents, buying tuition for their kids, flying them around the world on private jets, taking them out on their super yachts, because 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court decided to legalize political bribery. If Democrats take power in this November, all 2 branches, all 3 parts, we've got to do something about it. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Ralph Nader's most recent book, Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think. This is from the first chapter. It's titled Plutocracy of Maximums, Democracy of Minimums. When I was a student at Princeton University, I learned from my anthropology studies the concentration of power in the hands of a few is common to all cultures, societies, nations, tribes, cities, towns, and villages. Even where the thirst for self-governance and democracy is strong, as was the case in New England towns before the American Revolution against King George III, wealthy Tories were there too. In central and western Massachusetts, the farmers used the term the river gods to describe the rich merchants using the Connecticut River as a possible profitable trading route. These days, most people protesting for economic justice use the term the 1% to describe the ultra-small group of people who wield enormous influence over our society today. There is something about the differences in skill, determination, lineage, avarice, and pure luck that stratifies most people from the rulers who dominate them. In the political realm, the few become dominant because they hoard wealth and are driven to exercise power over others. When a small group rules a society, the political system is considered an oligarchy. And when only money and wealth determine how a society is controlled, the political system is a plutocracy. From the standpoint of a democratic society, both oligarchy and plutocracy are inherently unjust and corrupt. Of course, there are variations in the degrees of authoritarianism and cruelty that each system exercises over the communities it relies on for workers and wealth. Scholars have resorted to using phrases like benign dictatorship or wise rules or paternalistic hierarchies to describe lighter touches by those few who impose their rule over the many. Thomas Paine simply called them tyrannies. People, families, and communities can only take so much abuse before they rise up to resist. The job of the rulers is always to find that line and provide the lowest level of pay, security, housing, consumer protection, healthcare, and political access for society so that they can extract and hoard the greatest amount of wealth, power, and immunity from justice for themselves. In many ways, the majority of Americans live in a democracy of minimums, while the privileged few enjoy a plutocracy of maximums. This small volume is not just about the ravages of power or the assaults against disadvantaged and downtrodden communities. The subject here is the dominating influence of the 1% in business, politics, health, education, and society as a whole. Over the past 50 years, Americans have suffered the relentless commercialization of everyday life, their privacy and their childhoods, their parks and prisons, their public budgets and foreign policy, their schools and religious institutions, their elections and governments, and the most basic societal institutions of them all, the family. Consider all the family functions that have been outsourced to business. Eating, cleaning, childcare, counseling, therapy, entertainment, sports, lawn work, simple repairs have been increasingly commercialized, commodified, packaged, and marketed back to us as products of luxury and convenience. Even mother's breast milk has been displaced by infant formula. In a plutocracy, commercialism dominates far beyond the realm of economics and business. Everything is for sale, and money is power. But in an authentic democracy, there must be commercial-free zones where the power of human rights, citizenship, community, equality, and justice are free from the corrupting influence of money. Our elections and our governments should be such commercial-free zones. Our environment, air, and water should never fall under the control of corporations or private owners. Children should not be programmed by a huckstering economy where their vulnerable consciousness becomes the target of relentless corporate marketing and advertising. American history demonstrates that whenever commerce dominates all aspects of national life, a host of ills and atrocities have not just festered and spread, but become normal. Enslavement, land grabs, war, ethnic cleansing, serfdom, child labor, abusive working conditions, corrupt political systems, environmental contamination, and immunity from the law for the privileged few. History also shows that whenever there have been periods when enough of the country organizes and resists, we see movements of people and communities breaking through power. Progress is made, rights are won, education and literacy increase, oppression is diminished. It was in this manner that people of conscience abolished the living nightmare imposed by the laws and whips of white enslavers. the nation moved closer to promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We won more control over our work, our food, our land, our air, and our water. Women secured the right to vote. Civil rights were elevated and enforced. Public schools, improved environments, workplace collective bargaining, and consumer protections did not spontaneously evolve. They were won by people demanding them and breaking through power. These moments of great progress are expressed in terms of new legislation, regulations, and judicial decisions that directly benefit life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The book, Breaking Through Power, by Ralph Nader. Breaking through power, it's easier than we think.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Wednesday. We've got a really big shoe for you today. By the way, there was an election last night, or there were primary elections all around the country. Ilhan Omar won her primary seat in Minnesota. She was going up against an AIPAC-backed candidate. She beat them, or him, or her. I'm not sure who it was. Also, two Republican-fueled referenda on the Wisconsin ballot yesterday went down. The immediate result is that the Republican-led legislature won't be able to divert the power to spend federal funds from Governor Evers to themselves. This is a major power grab attempt by Republicans. And, the voters just said, nah, not going to go along with that. Are you kidding? In Missouri, after putting up every possible roadblock, Republican officials finally certified an amendment for the November ballot for this fall that would allow voters to restore abortion rights in that state, in Missouri. And, if you want to let us know what happened in your state, if you had a primary and you think that there was something that, consequential that happened, give us a shout. We've got a lot to talk about today. The news, not a dog whistle, but a howl. The battleground map is widening. The UAW hits out at Trump and Musk. Also, billionaire dreams, middle-class nightmares, how Trump and the GOP turned hope into a billionaire's fantasy. That's my op-ed today. I'll tell you about that in a moment. In the second hour of our program today, the entire hour will be Congressman Mark Pocan. He's usually here the first hour on Wednesdays. Today it'll be second hour Wednesday. Sometimes with a member of Congress, you got to work around their schedules. And if you have a question for Congressman Pocan or something you want to bring to his attention, that will be the entire second hour of our program. The third hour of our program, my friend and colleague Dean Obeidallah, who does a program here on Sirius XM in the evening, is going to drop by. He's got a brilliant new article out. Trump attacks on Vice President Harris are more sinister than you think. There's actually he's finding shall we say, a hidden agenda. I think you'll find it fascinating. Also in Florida, unionized teachers are being forced to choose between a real union and a phony one put up by an anti-union group because of DeSantis' new anti-union law. This is something Republicans want to take national. It's really a horrifying story. I'll tell you about that in the third hour. And Geeky Science, clean your microwave. I'll tell you why. It's really a bizarre story. Who would have thought? But to start out with the news of the day, this is just incredible. This new ad, or whatever you want to call it. It's on Twitter. It's or X. From the account called the Trump War Room. And Nate's got the graphic of this. He can put it up on the screen for the people watching us on Free Speech TV and on YouTube and whatnot, Facebook, Twitter. It calls itself, this is from the official War Room account of 2024, and it's two side-by-side photos. One is a neighborhood featuring brick homes with pristine lawns and American flags waving in the front yard, and it's captioned, "Your neighborhood under Trump." This is white people, right? The other photo consists of black and brown people sitting outside on the street, and it's captioned, "Your neighborhood under Kamala." And then underneath that, the words, "Import the third world, become the third world." I mean, this is Bill Kristol, the conservative, the right-wing guy, the guy who came up with Sarah Palin. Bill Kristol says, not a dog whistle, but a dog howl. George Conway, the Republican lawyer, he says, is this kind of racist? Because it seems kind of racist. Jonathan Greenberg, the journalist, he says, the more desperate Trump feels, the more crass and apparent his racism and lies become. Trump's long overdue death spiral of dementia, hatred, and jealousy has begun. It will only worsen. While for Harris, the best is yet to come.
And the Washington Post global affairs columnist, Ishan Tarut, said, shameless, ugly, and overt racism and hysteria. It's incredible. This is all they've got. All they have to sell the American people is hate. That's it. Moving along, Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump are both heading to North Carolina this week. Now, this is, big and meaningful news because what it says is that North Carolina is in play. Nobody thought North Carolina was in play. I realize Roy Cooper is the governor there. He's a Democrat. So it is possible to win, for Democrats to win statewide offices. The state is so heavily gerrymandered, the Republicans are going to control their House and Senate for a long, long time. But the fact that they're both going there, Harris is going to Raleigh on Friday, Trump is going to Asheville on Wednesday. Asheville, by the way, is one of the most liberal cities in North Carolina, although Raleigh's right up there. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of reception Trump gets on Wednesday. But this is one of only 7 very closely divided swing states that Trump won over Biden in 2020, the last presidential election. Out of all 7 swing states, this is the only one Trump won. And and everybody up until a few minutes ago, or a few days ago, was assuming that Trump was going to carry it. But all that changed when Biden dropped out of the race and endorsed Harris. She has visited North Carolina 16 times as vice president, by the way. And she's running neck and neck in all the surveys in North Carolina with Trump. And, Democratic strategists think, if Harris can win this state, then it opens up a whole different map, a whole different path to 270 electoral votes than the one that we are currently stuck with. Also, the UAW has filed, formally filed labor charges, federal labor violation charges against Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It is a crime under federal law to intimidate workers about joining a union. It is a crime under federal law to fire people for trying to start a union, although Elon Musk did that with a worker at Tesla. He was prosecuted for it, actually, and lost. This is under the National Labor Relations Act. And so Sean Fain, here's what they said. They were talking on Twitter, and Trump said, and I quote, I look at what you do. You walk in, you just say you want to quit. They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike, and you say, that's okay, you're all gone. And Musk is laughing as Trump is saying this. That's against the law. You can't intimidate workers. You can't threaten them with being fired if they go on strike, and you can't brag about it. So Sean Fain, the head of the United Auto Workers, has filed this federal labor complaint against both of them. And he said these are illegal attempts to threaten and intimidate workers who stand up for themselves by engaging in protected concerted activities such as strikes. Both Trump and Musk want working class people to sit down and shut up, and they laugh about it openly. It's disgusting, it's illegal, and it's totally predictable from these two clowns. Under federal law, workers, this is still Sean Fain, under federal law, workers cannot be fired for going on strike, and threatening to do so is illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. He adds, when I say Donald Trump is a scab, this is what I mean. He says Donald Trump will always side against workers standing up for themselves, and he will always side with billionaires like Elon Musk, who's contributing $45 million a month to a super PAC to get him elected. Both Trump and Musk want working class people to sit down and shut up, and they laugh about it openly. So there you go. Interesting. Meanwhile, oh no, that's for later. Yeah. So anyhow, that's kind of my news summary for the day. Also, like I said, if the primaries yesterday had anything of consequence going on in your state, give us a shout and let us know. On the other side of this break, I want to tell you about my op-ed today, Billionaire Dreams, Middle Class Nightmares, how Trump and the GOP turned hope into a billionaire's fantasy. And I'm just getting started on this, but, I just wanted to nail down some issues. I'll tell you all about that right after the break. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind today?
Tom, had an interesting incident just a few minutes ago. I was at a fast food restaurant, went to get some ketchup for my fries, and the cup shot out of my hand. The pressure in the dispenser I got sprayed all over the front of me with ketchup.
Oh,
but
no.
I prevailed. I sat down and was about to sit down, and I saw this nicely dressed lady sitting at the next table over, and I explained why I was wearing ketchup all over me. And then it kind of, then I looked over, and here was this lady trying to figure out how to use the order screen, and these millennials were trying to walk her through it just to get the line moving.
Right.
And I said to this lady, boy, I tell you, us boomers, we're in a mess, low tech and all that. And I said, boy, it's nothing like it's going to be if things go wrong. We'll be out in the streets without Medicare and Social Security, blah, blah, blah. What a mess we're going to be in. And it turned out, and she says, yeah. And then she says, well, it depends on which side we're on. And I says, well, I'm a Democrat. I proudly said, I'm a Democrat. And she says, and, she was a Trumper. And then we kind of went back and forth. I couldn't believe it. I was saying these things to her across the table, all very civilly, but it came shot back and forth. And I said, well, how's it going to feel when you don't have any Social Security and Medicare? She says, well, I don't have to worry about that. I'm lucky. I says, well, what about the other people? And she says, I'm worried about more important things. And I says, oh yeah, it's going to be real great when they start tracking your daughter's periods. And then she went back to, oh, that's the least of my worries. These throw-offs. And we just went, and I said, and she says, well, did you hear about Tim Walz? He's a socialist. I said, so what? Trump's a liar. Back and forth.
Oh,
but we stayed very civil about it. And I says, and when I got up to go, I says, well, I guess your vote's going to cancel out my vote and vice versa. And we just have a nice day. Because every time she started saying something, I just put my thumb up like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I would also, they're trying to deflect our attention off of these big numbers. How they're saying, oh, well, they're just having rallies and rallies. When are they going to have some news conferences? They just want to divert the attention from the numbers that we're drawing in.
Sure. Yeah. And the press is whining. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes,
and Elon Musk and his website, what is it? X. It's getting to be the website of weirdos and crackpots having Trump on there.
And Nazis.
I mean, it's just bad publicity.
Yeah, no, it's the right-wingification of X is a sight to behold. It's just incredible.
Yeah. And that fake Mar-a-Lago news conference he had, there is a website on NPR, and it's called 162 Lies and Distortions. And they go in full paragraphs, pulling out his lies and countering it with the facts.
Yeah.
It's 162 Lies and Distortions on NPR.org.
I saw that. It's a really, and that's from 1 2 hour or hour and change press conference. I mean, that 162 lies. Well, that's Donald Trump for you.
2 lies per minute. Yeah, 2 lies per minute.
Exactly. He's
can't
a compulsive liar. You can't. I don't think he can. Diane, thank you. Thank you for the call. And good on you. Yeah. You're giving some of our other callers who regularly encounter right wingers a run for their money. So thank you, Diane. Good talking to you. It's 19 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Washington Post reported that it looks like General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the dictator of Egypt, organized a $10 million cash bribe to Donald Trump when he was most desperate for cash during the 2016 election. And then Donald Trump repaid him by embracing him, bringing him into the White House, making Egypt one of his visits, and just doing things that normally you don't do with countries that are run by dictators. The Washington Post pretty much nailed this. Well, why didn't we learn about this earlier? The FBI investigated it starting in 2018, but in 2019, Attorney General Bill Barr shut down the investigation. This is not the first time he has done this. He also shut down the investigation into the Iran-Contra affair, where the Reagan campaign was paying Iran with weaponry to hold the hostages to screw Jimmy Carter. There's an op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, "When Will Bill Barr Be Brought to Justice?" Check it out.
In the land of the free, where the dollar ain't supreme, Trump and his crew, they sold us a dream. They talk about freedom, they talk about pride, but it's all just a game where only they thrive. Billionaire dreams, mansions and gold, while the rest of us watch as our hopes are sold. They jet set around from Florida to the skies, living in luxury while the middle class cries. Billionaire
Dreams, Middle Class Nightmares is the title of today's op-ed over at HartmannReport.com. How Trump and the GOP turned hope into a billionaire's fantasy. And, this is both Trump and J.D. Vance, when they rolled out their campaigns, started talking about the middle class. Trump, back in 2015, he said, "Sadly, the American dream is dead. But if I get elected president, I'll bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before." And J.D. Vance, when he accepted his nomination at the RNC, he said, "Some people tell me I've lived the American dream, and of course they're right, and I'm so grateful for it." So when Republicans talk about the American dream and Democrats talk about the American dream, what are they talking about? Well, I've got a new book out. It will be out in, is this August? It'll be out next month. And it's titled The Hidden History of the American Dream, The Demise of the Middle Class and How to Rescue Our Future. It's the 10th book in the Hidden History series. And so, I basically summarize this stuff, but here it is, in one article. When Democrats talk about the American dream, they mean something very specific. This was pioneered by Franklin Roosevelt. Democrats realize that a middle class is not a normal thing. It has to be created by government, by intervention in the so-called free market. And thus, Democrats argue the American dream includes the ability to, quote, to number one, move into the middle class with a good union job so a single wage earner can support a family, buy a home for a reasonable price where the mortgage doesn't exceed a third of the post-tax household income, live safely without fear that your home will be broken into or your child will be shot at school or in the playground, have a decent health care that won't bankrupt you if somebody gets sick, every few years get a new car and cover the cost of maintenance and gas or electricity, put your kids through school and college, take an annual family vacation, save enough or have a pension for a comfortable retirement augmented by Social Security, and pay reasonable taxes to fund programs that support the existence of a middle class. That's the American dream that Democrats talk about. Now, when Republicans talk about the American dream, like J.D. Vance, he's worth millions and millions of dollars. The guy's a multimillionaire. Or Donald Trump, who's a billionaire. When they talk about the American dream, this is what Republicans mean. The ability to get rich beyond the dreams of King Midas, to own multiple mansions from Florida to Colorado to Switzerland, and Trump, just added Venezuela on his Monday Night Talk with Musk, to cavort with nubile young women and investment bankers on your very own super yacht or the Lolita Express private jet, to have private concierge doctors and nurses on call at all times, to employ private security to guard your mansions and wield weapons of war to keep you safe from the masses, to buy judges for the Supreme Court and get decisions that make your life easier, to legally bribe judges and politicians at every level, from the county commissioners to Congress and the president, and to avoid paying taxes so successfully that the average American billionaire today pays less than 8% in income taxes. And you see this difference in all these different issues. Unionizations. Democrats argue that, unions are a good thing and they built the American middle class. Republicans argue that unions are a terrible thing. In fact, they pushed through Taft-Hartley in 1947 to give you the so-called right to work for less, and virtually every red state is now a right to work for less state, where it's really, really hard to unionize. You've got some states, some red states in the United States, where the unionization rates are below 3%, whereas the average for blue states is around 20%. Housing. Democrats say housing should be a right, not a privilege. And so they've supported housing vouchers, public housing, government subsidies, and tax breaks for developers to develop low-income housing. Republicans think the free market should dictate this. Right. Healthcare. Democrats think healthcare should be a right rather than a privilege. Republicans have fought tooth and nail against Medicare, against Medicaid,
against Obamacare, against anything. You know, every Democratic president since Harry Truman has proposed a national single-payer health care system or something close to it. And Republicans have fought every single one of them. Education. Democrats want good, high-quality, free public schools and free or at least affordable public colleges. Republicans are working hard to dismantle their public schools. In 4 states now, Republicans have done statewide voucher systems so that the money that would go to public schools can go to private for-profit schools or religious schools. And you know, they hate teachers unions and they hate teachers and public schools. Women's rights. Democrats say women should have the right to make decisions about their own bodies, to have full agency in the business world, and to decide for themselves if they want to divorce an abusive husband. J.D. Vance says women should be forced by the law to stay with abusive husbands. They want to bring back the Comstock Act, which would outlaw all abortions in the United States, both surgical and by pharmaceuticals. Some Republicans and their billionaire funders have gone so far as to say that America started going downhill when women got the vote in 1920. Crime and guns. Democrats want good gun control. Republicans want more guns. They say, you know, if you want to decrease the number of shootings, have more guns. Arm teachers. It's stupid. Retirement. Democrats want Social Security to be strengthened. Republicans have fought against Social Security ever since 1935. Corruption. Democrats see holding public office as a sacred trust, an opportunity to serve their communities and the nation. Republicans see it as an opportunity to bribe, you know, to take bribes from billionaires and big corporations. Taxes. Democrats want, you know, reasonable taxation. Republicans have run up $34 trillion in our national debt, just with a series of tax cuts under Reagan, Bush, and Trump. And that doesn't begin to talk about things like climate change, foreign policy, religion and government, minority rights, or democracy itself. I mean, the difference between these two parties is stark. It is stark. Is our democracy going to survive? Well, that's going to depend on how many of us show up to vote this fall.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You can find that compare and contrast article over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Billionaire Dreams, Middle Class Nightmares.
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding 2 forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status. Fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. The spiritual response to the attack.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Welcome back, 34 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Bob in High Point, North Carolina. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. Just wanted to share a couple of footnotes to your story at the top of the hour about Trump's rally in Asheville, North Carolina tonight.
Oh, it's tonight. I thought it was next week.
No, it's
thanks for fixing that for me, Bob.
But I wanted to get a couple of facts out before the spin. The venue that Trump's speaking at, actually there are two venues in that complex. The larger one, the Civic Center, seats 7,000 people. He spoke there in 2016, was not able to fill it. That was the venue that the campaign originally booked. They moved to the smaller venue, the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, which seats 2,431 people for tonight's rally, and issued 1,600 tickets for the rally. So it'll be interesting to see how the campaign wants to spin. You know, I'm sure there'll be thousands turned away at the door, yada, yada, yada. But very interesting to me. And you mentioned this, what a blue city Asheville is. It really is. In fact, it's sort of the Santa Cruz of the East.
Yeah.
Very counterculture, but in a very red county. It's a blue dot in a red county. And also, you know, I'm sure there'll be MAGAs at the rally tonight from eastern Tennessee and from northern Georgia are close to Asheville.
Yeah.
But one last little thing that made me smile, about a half mile from the venue in Asheville tonight is a comedy club where Stormy Daniels will be performing this Friday night.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, that's great. So, so how do you know that Trump has only sold 1,600 tickets for his 2,400 person venue tonight?
That's what the campaign released. That was reported by the Asheville Citizen-Times.
So
today.
It's in your local newspaper?
Yes, sir. And the other thing is the city made the campaign pay $82,000 in advance for tonight's event.
Oh, yeah, because Trump doesn't pay his bills. That's interesting.
So $500,000, I believe.
Yeah. So and Kamala Harris is going to be in Raleigh on Friday. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. They have not actually announced that venue yet. It's a reschedule for her event that was supposed to happen last Thursday that was canceled because of the weather for the hurricane.
Because of the hurricane, yeah. Okay, Bob,
sir.
Thanks for the info. I appreciate it. Good talking to you. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Mr. Hartmann, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And
back at you.
I'm asking you for a one-time dispensation because first, it's not everything goes Friday, and I'm kind of off topic here.
Go for it.
And secondly, I know you normally allow one question, but I want to ask you two, but I'll be very pithy. Okay, I want to talk about the elephant in the room with the Harris campaign. As you know, I'm nonpartisan, but I do caucus with the Democrats for my own reasons, very esoteric ones. And one of the things that I'm not hearing from the Harris campaign yet is international relations. And as you know, there are hot spots all over the world, from Ukraine to Taiwan, the Mid-Pacific, Venezuela, Al-Kebulon, also known as Africa. My concern is that we live in a time where worldwide conflict could erupt at any second. And I think domestically, the Harris campaign has momentum. But if there is some type of worldwide conflict or a major conflict erupts, I think that Donald Trump's a shoo-in, and I say that because of the historic racism, particularly anti-blackism, paternalistic racism in this country. And that really concerns me. I wanted to know your thoughts on that. And then my second question to you is more of a silly one. Have you noticed, and I know that you're a trained psychotherapist and you've probably done a great deal of study in body language. Have you noticed that Donald Trump, if you were to turn down the sound at one of his rallies or one of his speeches or press conferences or whatever that crap is Agent Orange does, do you notice, you had used the term, and I always use it, you talked about his accordion hands before. Have you noticed how wildly his gesticulations are? And the reason I mention this is because during the Biden debate, he pushed back very hard against sitting down at a table for the debate. And I watched his rally in Montana, I think it was Friday, and which is just a repeat of, like you said, Fat Elvis. It's just, you know, I do this stuff because I have to.
Right.
But he has these wild gesticulations. Can you? Is there something to that?
I think he just thinks he's being theatrical. You know, he's been a performer his whole life, and I think that he thinks that being and there's some truth to it. Being animated, you know, makes you seem like you're high energy and keeps your audience attention,
keeps the attention of your audience. With regard to foreign policy, I get your concern. I haven't heard Vice President Harris speak specifically about Taiwan and China yet, although she may have. I have heard her speak on both Ukraine and Gaza, and she has a position that so far is, I was going to say to the left of, but I don't think this is really a left-right issue. She's more willing to confront Israel about Gaza than President Biden is, but she has to walk a very fine line there because she's Vice President of the United States, and she has to, at least until January 20th, go along with the foreign policy of the guy who's the boss, the actual president. And she can't be seen as America fighting against itself, essentially. With regard to Ukraine, she's also been outspoken in her support of Ukraine. And yesterday, the administration, and I think she referenced this yesterday, the administration came out and said that Ukraine has invaded Russia, and we essentially support that. That is part of their effort to fight back against the invasion of Ukraine. So, I think she's taking some pretty strong foreign policy positions. I haven't heard, her speak about any other parts of the world, but today is supposed to be the day that, or maybe it's tomorrow, that she's rolling out her economic policy, or maybe it's even Friday. There's a rally. I guess it's oh, that's right. It's the Raleigh, North Carolina rally on Friday that she's going to be rolling out her economic policy. Probably, the following week would be foreign policy. Actually, the following week will be the convention. But, that it'll be coming.
Do you understand my concern, though? Because if you look, let's go back to 2001 with George W. Bush. And after 9/11, he was a shoo-in for his second term, because this is this, white male, protect us kind of thing. And this is Donald Trump's shtick.
Yeah, well, I think that was partly just because he was president when 9/11 happened. I think if Al Gore had been president when 9/11 happened, I doubt he would have declared war on a country that had nothing to do with it, Iraq. But I think that he would have enjoyed similar popularity. Same with FDR when Pearl Harbor happened. When the American.
But I'm just saying you understand my concern here.
I do, but I don't think that an attack on America would necessarily accrue benefit to Trump. Because he's not president right now. It would depend on how Biden and Harris respond to it. I'm glad to hear that because he often talks about I got along with Xi Jinping, I got along with Vladimir Putin, I got along with and if the American, because one thing that sells better than anything in this country, there are two things that sell in America guaranteed, and that is racism, particularly anti-blackism, from Willie Horton up to the current date, and fear. Yeah. No, I totally get it, but like I said, I believe it was yesterday, I did the whole, moving toward pleasure, moving away from pain, maybe that was Monday, thing. I think that the power of fear of Trump, anyway, the fear that Trump, and Vance are peddling, I think that has diminished substantially. I just think Americans are ready to put it behind us. Kenyatta, I got to move along, but nice to hear from you. Always nice to hear from you. Thanks a lot, and keep writing over on Substack. It's a great newsletter.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Andre in Chicago. Hey, Andre, what's on your mind today?
Hey there, Tom. How you doing today?
Good. What's up? Hope you're well.
Hey, Tom. Look, I'm fine. Thank you, Tom. What I want to say, Tom, is that one thing that frustrated Democrats, the Democratic supporters with Joe Biden, was that he appeared to never fight back. As he said, Donald Trump was out there saying all these things for him, but they appeared to never fight back. So it looks like to me, judging from what I see Walt's doing, that the Democrats are acting as if they haven't learned nothing from the past. And I'll tell you what I mean when I say fight back. Here it is that Vance is out there talking about Walt's lied. Well, why don't he reverse it on him? And when he says that kind of stuff, he say, well, you call people childish cat ladies, and that was disparaging to women and made women feel bad. Yeah. When he accused Waltz of lying, then he should say, well, nobody lies more than Donald Trump, and explain to us why it is that you said all these bad things about Donald Trump, then you turned around and supported and voted for him. See, this is what I'm talking about, fight back. The Democratic supporters were yearning for that type of stuff because it appeared that our champion Nobody wants to see their champion in the ring get punched out, and that's what it appeared that was happening with Joe Biden. So hopefully they learn from the past and they start fighting back. Stop playing the Mr. Nice Guy. And I'm not talking about just running commercials to fight back. I'm talking about while you're out there on the campaign trail, say these things, because they have a tendency to let these Republicans set the narrative, and if you let a narrative go for so long unchallenged, then it settles in people's mind, and they begin to believe something that's really not the truth, Tom.
Yeah, there's a new ad out. It's a web ad right now, but it's on Twitter, calling Trump feeble, sad, and incoherent. Or it's three. The first of the three words is feeble, but basically it's just a whole supercut of all these different times that Trump has just made a complete fool of himself in his public speaking, and over the years. And that came out of the Harris-Walz campaign this morning. And so I think they are fighting back, Andre. I think your point is well taken, and it's an important one. That they do need to be playing hardball here, particularly around J.D. Vance claiming that because 5 years ago, talking about gun control, Tim Walz said, the weapons of war that I carried into war, when he meant that I carried while I was in the military. This one slip 5 years ago, they're trying to turn it into this grand, oh my God, he lied about his service and stolen back. They're fighting back on this stuff, and I think it's a good thing. Andre, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit Tom.com for audio and video archives.
And Ukraine is continuing to expand their push into Russia. This is mind-boggling. Stay tuned. I'll be right back with more of your calls. The funniest thing, just a quick story here about the Ukrainian invasion of Russia. They invaded a town yesterday in Russia, just right over the border, that has a well-known restaurant in it. And so they went on Google, the Ukrainian soldiers went on Google and left a bunch of restaurant reviews and talked about the food. And one guy showed his tank pulling into the parking lot, and he said, the parking lot's not quite big enough for my tank. It had to knock over a fence to get in there. It's just really funny. I mean, these guys are having a good time. I have a feeling it's going to be tough when the Russians really start fighting back, but it's pretty amazing. All right, picking up your calls here. Harlan in Los Angeles. Hey, Harlan, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm well. What's up?
Good. Yeah, I called a couple weeks ago and I put my vote in for Tim Walz. I wanted him to be the one that Kamala Harris picked, and I'm really glad that she did, and it's been amazing.
Yeah.
And I have a question. I'm really, really happy. I've watched every rally on YouTube. I just can't get enough of how great this makes me feel and how great I see the country responding to it. And then I read online a couple things here and there where I want to know if it's true. God, I hope it's not, where she isn't the same person in her campaign, like her campaign manager is kind of mean and keeps people away from her, and that there's a lot of backbiting there. And I hope it's like a Republican, fake meme. And I want to know if you know anything about this, because
no, I've not heard anything about this. I know that she's added a couple of people to her campaign in the last week, including one of the old Obama people. Everything I've heard coming out of her campaign seems like harmony and roses. Campaigns are intense crucibles, and you will find you will have people who are dissatisfied or unhappy with how they've been treated, didn't get the job they wanted, things like that. But I'm not worried about it, Harlan, and I haven't seen or heard anything like that. Although I don't watch Fox News, it's probably where it would show up. Harlan, thanks for the call. Sam in Marengo, Indiana. Hey, Sam, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. What's up?
Couldn't Biden use the Insurrection Act if the Trumpsters try to overthrow the election with the certify the vote?
Yeah, he could. It would be very dangerous. I mean, it's the Insurrection Act needs to be fixed because it basically grants the president dictatorial powers, and
yes.
This is a law that was passed back during the John Adams administration, I think, or maybe Jefferson administration. So,
well, if overthrowing elections not insurrection, what is?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we had on January 6th, certainly was an insurrection. But Donald Trump did not invoke the Insurrection Act because it was his insurrection. But I think this is going to go, not with a bang but a whimper. I mean, to paraphrase T.S. Eliot, I just don't. I get it. Everybody's all freaked out. They're not going to certify the election. This, that, and the other thing. I think they have lost an awful lot of the vitality, juice, power, public support, energy that these maggots had. And I just don't think it's. I'm not real worried.
Plan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't this all Steve Bannon's plan?
Yeah, Steve Bannon, who's in prison right now. So that should tell you something, right? Sam, I got to run, but thanks for the call and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV there in Indiana. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour, so I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Geeky alert! When you look at a dog food...
Of America's pride, with good wages and every effort, every task, a brighter future is all we ask. Work is the heart of America's pride, with good wages and life's quality beside. Every effort, every task, a brighter future is all we ask. Factories hum and fields we sow, office lights in a steady glow. Teachers, builders, and those who care, together we're stronger everywhere. Work is the heart of America's pride, with good wages and life's quality beside. Every effort.
Picking up your calls here. Brandon in San Jose. Hey, Brandon, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine. What's up?
Okay, so you had a question earlier about why Trump is slurring lately. And I think, a simple answer is that a simple theory that I have is that he's always been doing this. I don't know how worse it's gotten lately.
I've never heard him slur before. I think that either his false teeth were loose or he's had a mini stroke.
Well, he has veneers. He doesn't have dentures, right?
I don't know. I don't have any idea. I mean, when people start slurring like that or talking weird, if it's not neurological, if it's not, some sort of an infection or a stroke, then, the most likely answer is that their dentures are loose. He needs his polygrip.
Could it be a side effect of amphetamines of some kind?
Of what?
Amphetamines, sorry.
Oh, amphetamines. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I mean, it's possible that he was snorting Adderall and that kind of, short-circuited the wiring in his brain. I just don't know. What I do know is that he was slurring. And in fact, I caught it at the very beginning of the thing. I posted on Twitter, why is he slurring? A bunch of other people caught it, and now the media was all over it. It was only a one-day story. If it had been Biden, it would have lasted for 2 weeks, and there would be New York Times editorials calling for him to step down. But, because it's Trump, the media loves to cut him a break because he makes them so much money. But I don't know what it is, Brandon, but, it could be any of those things.
Well, either way, the idea of this guy being in power again, with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and all that stuff, and
it's
the fact
scary.
That and we still have nuclear proliferation all over the globe. It's really a bad idea.
Yeah,
I get really nervous about it.
I'm with you, Brandon. Brandon, thank you for the call. Spot on. Elvis in Houston. Hey, Elvis, what's on your mind today?
Hey, just a couple of real quick points, and then I'll just listen to your response. One is I heard Ali Velshi was speaking about Project 2025. I think it was on Saturday. And he mentioned that on the tax changes that they wanted to cut corporate taxes and taxes a rich individual, that they had recommended some kind of restriction on the ability to change that law in the future. I think I said like some kind of requirement for a 2/3 majority to be able to change that. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, the Republicans want a 2/3 majority in Congress to raise taxes on rich people, which would just prevent any future tax increases. So.
Right. So they basically want to lock it in. The other thing, real quickly, and this is just an opinion, maybe a little humorous. I was looking up a picture of Reichsfuhrer SS Himmler and the guy who's head of the Heritage Foundation. They have very similar facial features to me. So just curious. I don't know if they're distant relatives.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. They certainly probably share a philosophy. Thank you, Elvis. Yeah, good talking to you. Fred in Bremerton, Washington. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Hey, Tom, long time. I've been listening to you for a while now.
Well, thank you.
How's Portlandia?
It's a beautiful town. It really is, and it's getting better. What's on your mind, Fred?
I have to come in. Well, there's two things. First off, maybe Trump went in the green room with Musk and they had a little ganja before the sit down.
Yeah, I think Adderall is more likely, but yeah, it's possible. I mean, the people who worked with him, Celebrity Apprentice, said he used to snort Adderall all the time.
Jeez. Okay, so my question is, what is your opinion about this thing with J.D. Vance and his app harvest entrepreneur investment scheme that he tried to start down in Kentucky and put a lot of people out of work?
Yeah,
What's your opinion about that?
They started this company, and then they brought all these undocumented immigrants in to replace the Kentucky workers. And then they left. Yeah, and then the CEOs, the senior executives, and Vance was on the board, by the way. Senior executives basically took all the money and bankrupted the company, and people were left with nothing. I don't know if people. I don't know how widespread the knowledge is in Kentucky that Vance did this to them. Do you know, Fred?
I don't know. I was looking into the possibilities that the people that were inspecting it did it with a wink and a nod.
Yeah, probably.
Because they had to go in there and inspect all those complaints, and no citations, no kind of tickets were ever issued to that company.
Well, it is Kentucky, and Kentucky is very employer-friendly and worker-hostile. So, I mean, it's a Republican state.
Yeah,
so
the minority leader, I'm sure he'll agree with you there.
There you go. Fred, thank you for the call. We're hitting the top of the hour here. Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us on the other side of this break for the entire next hour, taking your calls middays with Mark. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jeffrey Sachs, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. This is from Chapter 13. It's titled Restoring Trust in American Governance. More than any other threat facing America is the collapse of civic virtue, meaning the honesty and trust that enables the country to function as a decent, forward-looking, optimistic nation. The defining characteristic of the 2016 presidential election is that neither candidate was trusted. The defining characteristic of American society in our day is that Americans trust neither their political institutions nor each other. We need a conscious effort to reestablish trust by making fair play an explicit part of the national agenda. We have already noted the collapse in public confidence in the federal government. The collapse of trust in each other is equally striking. For decades, pollsters have asked America whether most people can be trusted. And for decades, the proportion answering in the negative has been rising. There are probably two main reasons for this downward trend. The first is the sharp widening of income inequalities since the 1970s. The second is the widespread feeling that those at the top of the heap in income and power regularly abuse their wealth and influence. Donald Trump's relentless assertion in the 2016 campaign that the system is rigged, a claim that resonated widely despite the obvious irony that Trump himself had been a relentless rigger of the system. The system is indeed rigged for the big corporate interests, such as the drug companies that set drug prices 1,000 times the production cost. It's rigged for the large IT companies, such as Apple, that deploy egregious tax loopholes that enable them to park funds overseas in tax-free overseas accounts. It's rigged for the hedge fund managers who take home hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and then face a top income tax rate of 20%, far below what others, vastly poorer Americans, must pay. It's rigged for the investment bankers that deliberately cheated their clients and then walked away with a mere slap on the wrist, if that. And the fact that the Clintons parlayed public office and a family foundation into a vehicle for vast personal enrichment was not lost on an unhappy and distrustful electorate. Considerable social science research in recent years has given laboratory evidence to an ancient truth that power and wealth do indeed corrupt. Consider a fascinating psychology experiment recently published in Nature, a leading scientific journal. The employees of a major international bank were divided randomly into two groups, a control group and a treatment group. Both groups were given forms to fill out at the start of the experiment. The control group was asked general questions. The treatment group was asked questions about their role in banking. Then each group was asked to flip coins and report honestly how many heads they flipped, being told that a greater number of heads would lead to a higher monetary reward. The control group reported that they flipped around 50% heads, an honest report. The treatment group claimed to have flipped around 58% heads, a dishonest report that exaggerated the proportion of heads flipped. The conclusion? Simply by being reminded that they were bankers by filling out the form about banking, the treatment group was spurred on to cheat. The psychologists concluded that the business culture of banking within that representative bank was a culture of cheating and greed. One feels that America is like that today, especially at the top. This is an age of impunity, a time when the rich and powerful get away with their misdeeds and are even lauded for them in some quarters. Donald Trump met the accusation that he had not paid income taxes for years with the response, "That makes me smart." Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein met the charge that his bank had cheated its customers with the response that they were, quote, doing God's work. Hedge fund manager John Paulson was celebrated on Wall Street for his cleverness in conspiring with Goldman Sachs to bilk a German bank out of hundreds of millions of dollars. The leaked emails show how the Clintons mixed their private, public, and foundation activities and simply confirm for many unhappy Americans that this is how the system works. The United States Supreme Court has shamelessly fed this impunity. In the infamous Citizens United case, the Supreme Court shockingly equated anonymous corporate contributions to political campaigns with free speech. The court demonstrated that it had no realistic sense of how such corporate contributions have undermined the legitimacy of our political system. In a more recent case, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction of former Virginia Governor Robert McDonnell, who had been convicted of fraud and extortion for taking gifts from a businessman promoting his health products to the state. McDonnell walked away free from a shoddy and egregious abuse of office. I've noted repeatedly that other high-income countries do not face these same trends. The U.S. pattern of rising inequality, falling trust, and increasing money in politics is not simply a reflection of the times or an inevitable side effect of democracy in the 21st century. Indeed, while many other countries are caught in a similar spiral of rising inequality, falling trust, increasing corruption, many others are not. Canada, for example, has successfully avoided these extremes, even though we share a common North American economy and a 3,000-mile border. Decency and trust can be maintained even in our complicated, globalized times. While there's no magic wand to restore social trust in the United States, there are important guideposts for citizens, businesses, and public officials. I suggest 6 key steps. First, we should acknowledge the dangerous hold of the lobbyists and the super rich on the political process. While many incumbents in office today will not sever their ties with their campaign contributors, citizens should sever their ties with politicians who rely on such contributions. While many, so the book is Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable by Jeffrey Sachs.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us is our buddy Congressman Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's a current member and chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus, chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. His website is pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And he will be with us for the entire hour, taking your calls at 202-808-9925. And Congressman Pocan, welcome back. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. Thanks so much for having me. I think what's interesting is the last time we were together, we were talking about VP picks, and we got talking about Tim Walz. And, the fact that he's now been added to the ticket, I think everyone has been extremely happy. Politically, he's gotten a ton done in Minnesota, in the upper Midwest, the states you have to win. Other than maybe some sports teams we don't like in Minnesota, he's very much like Wisconsin and Michigan in particular, being from the upper Midwest. And, this ticket just keeps pushing hard. So I just thought it was interesting because the very last time I think we talked, we were discussing VP picks, and it kind of came true what we were, I guess some of us were hoping for.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I remember you speaking really well of him. I'm sorry? You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I remember you speaking really well of him, when we talked 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. And I learned a lot about him, just from my listeners. We've got a big radio station in Minneapolis, KTRC, or not, KTNF. KTNF. People just love him. They really love him. I think this is going to go really well. So, you want to start picking up calls here?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, let's go for it. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to talk about the immigration issue again. It's going to be a red-hot topic of the election. And I want to make the comment that Democrats are terribly mishandling it. Just like they mishandled globalization and free trade with China, I think they're blowing it with immigration. We talk about you want to improve American standards of living, improve the housing situation, bring up incomes. Well, if you don't control the flow of immigration into your economy, you are constantly going to undermine American workers and make housing more scarce. So why don't progressive Democrats adopt the slogan of some yes, all no? Talk about restrictions, control, and stop using this loosey-goosey language of, well, we're all immigrants and we're a welcoming society and all these other terms, which to me indicates that you really don't want to control it. You're trying to play both sides of the fence. So how are we going to raise American standards with high levels of immigration?
There you go. Congressman?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not sure where you're hearing some of those things described, but I haven't
probably hearing them on Fox News.
Yeah, I gotta say Harris-Walz ticket is not saying that. They say that they want to have comprehensive immigration reform that has tougher protections at the border, but also a pathway to citizenship for people to be here legally. And that's exactly what I've heard, I think, almost word for word from the vice president on this issue. So, I think those who want to say that this is an important issue in the election simply either are living in Trump land and getting talking points from there, or ignoring the fact that when the Senate had a bill that would have done much of what we just talked about, it was Donald Trump who said that bill couldn't advance because he wanted the issue for the election, which means it's not really an issue to the Republicans. It's just an issue for people who seem to fall for talking points by conservative media.
There you go. Kate in Greenwood Village, Colorado, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. Nice talking to you both. My question is about polling. I'm just concerned about what polls we can listen to and know that they're effective, and so we know that Harris is going to win, Harris-Walz. And I'm concerned about the Senate, too, about the polling for the Senate. And I just saw that Tammy just won her primary, which I'm happy about. And I just want to get your opinion about what polls are legitimate.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the polls I watch the most are ones that are usually particular to a state. National polls, if they say the horse race on a national level, that is next to useless polling, right? Because it's swing states that are going to determine the election, especially states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, possibly Georgia and North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, and maybe some others. But in Wisconsin, our state poll I watched, that poll that's that's the longest running here, and I look to see how that's determining the various races, and sometimes how they ask the question, because that's important as well. But I would say in any particular area, don't look at national polls, because that's really, really not helpful. But individual state polls and swing districts, especially those that are kind of the standards in that community or that state, are really good to see and track. And then you can compare them too, because a poll sometimes with nothing to compare to doesn't mean much. But if I can compare it to the month before and the month before, that tells me a whole lot more than just a single poll.
Erda in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good morning. I'm glad to be able to talk to you, Congressman. I was so surprised to find out that Medicare will not cover shingles vaccines when they cover, like, the flu, which has to change every year. It's got to be more expensive than shingles. And I'm an elder. Shingles affect us. I've had it for almost 4 months, and it looks like I have that permanent neurological pain. They told me if my insurance would cover it, I could get, it's $235 per shot, and you need two. And I'm not into Advantage care plans. I listen to Tom. So what can be done? Can you campaign for that, please?
Yeah, I mean, we should be far more inclusive in what we consider healthcare. When it comes to things like Medicare, dental, vision, and hearing clearly should be covered. When it comes to vaccines and medications, clearly we should be fighting to lower the cost. And then we are, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, at least for people on Medicare, but it should be for everyone. Tom, I was at a rural hospital just yesterday in my district, and they went through one company, AbbVie's increases to them, and it was up to 234% increase. They're going to instantly have to pay. And these are on drugs that are on the market, so it's not like they're, for the first time ever, recovering their research and development costs. They literally are just upping the cost to that amount and making it harder and harder for that rural hospital to exist in a small community. So, wow. I think the answer is let's really look at healthcare in a more comprehensive way, whether it be Medicare for all or some other universal way to have healthcare, and then be inclusive of what healthcare really is, and don't let it be determined by special interests that unfortunately all too often wind up writing the laws.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Louise and I have both had the shingles vaccines, and our Medicare paid for it. So I don't, it may have been the Medigap plan that we had that it rolled over into, but I don't think so. I think Medicare, but I don't know. So anyhow, Alan in Rylander, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Greeting from the great Northwoods up here. So I've got a student loan question for you, Mark. So I'm very, quite frankly, worried about Kamala Harris and student loan cancellation, only because her sort of California club, Nancy Pelosi, Susan Rice, and others, they started the opposition to Biden's initial executive action canceling student loans. And so my hope is that somehow we might be able to convince Joe Biden before he leaves office to exercise the authority that Congress gave him many years ago through the Higher Education Act 1082A6. This is the law that he should have used to cancel in the first place. I would love to see him do that on his way out, because Kamala, we don't know what her agenda is yet, right? Because she hasn't put anything on her website. But everything tells me that this is going to be bad with Kamala for student loans.
Yeah, Alan, I mean, in general, so far what I've seen is, there's a lot of tracking with what Joe Biden did and what Kamala Harris is proposing. So I know she's going to have her own agenda, I think, coming out tomorrow on some economic issues. And I agree with you. I'd like to make sure that we're continuing to move forward on this. But I like your idea of making sure that anything that we may want to be able to try to get done in the remaining days of Joe Biden's presidency, he's been so good on so much policy, we should make sure that we're taking advantage of. And then, many things that you need to do more long-term, they're going to have to pass through Congress, we can work on with the next president.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking your calls. The former chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, now a member in good standing. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, and we'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Pocan. It's Middays with Mark. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good morning there, gentlemen. I have to second what Tom said about the shingles vaccine. I had my first one in April down at a Walgreens here, and I checked my original Medicare website for the EOBs and stuff, and they did pay it. And then I believe it was paid in full. It didn't even roll over to my supplement. I just got my second one and also a Pneumovax 20, and they didn't charge me anything. I don't know if that's hit yet, but it should be. But anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about this Israeli-Gaza conflict and Netanyahu. If there becomes further escalation in this, we have to seriously think about dialing back our support with arms and stuff to Israel. Putin supports Netanyahu. Netanyahu is in favor with Trump. He wants Trump back in. And I just see this thing going as just escalating and stuff like that. I'm not anti-Israel. I support Israel, but I am anti-Netanyahu. And we have some Jewish friends, and they feel the same way. They don't like Netanyahu. So I would like you to consider trying to get some stuff scaled back. Lastly, one quick thing. Apparently, Dick Durbin, Tom says, is still holding up blue slips for judges in the Senate. Thanks so much. I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you, Congressman. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I share your concerns. I think Netanyahu, in some ways, I feel like wants to prolong these negotiations, because the only thing that's not good for him is resolution for his potential in office. And it looks like they just put new goalposts out there on this peace process that Joe Biden, quite honestly, has proposed to have a ceasefire and a return of hostages. And then now the Hamas folks have said they're not going to come because the goalposts got moved. And at the end of the day, I think the only thing that's in the best interest of Israelis and Palestinians is a ceasefire and a return of the hostages, and going as close to the guidelines that Joe Biden has proposed. But, if not, at some point, we do have to use that leverage. I mean, if you've got a good friend, and Israel has been a friend of the United States for a long time, but if that friend is, on a Friday night having a 12-pack and maybe a few shots of Jack, and they want to get in their car, you take away their keys. You don't just allow them to continue if you're really a friend. And I think we have to have the same attitude towards Netanyahu, because I don't think what he's doing right now is in the best interest of the Israeli people either.
Yeah. Sandy in Athens, Ohio. We just have 45 seconds. You had a quick one, Sandy?
Thanks, Tom. I just don't write off Ohio. I live in Appalachia, and people in Appalachia feel about J.D. Vance's title of his book. They feel about the H word the same way black people feel about the N word. So don't write off Ohio. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you, Sandy. Congressman?
Yeah, no, for Sherrod Brown's sake alone, and Marcy Kaptur in the House and others, it's important that we're very actively doing everything we can. And quite honestly, J.D. Vance may be exposed more on the national stage than he was on the state stage, and it may turn a lot more people off from Republicans just watching him, because it's surprised even me.
Certainly appears to be going that way. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. You can find his website at Pocan, P-O-C-A-N, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan. Drop in and say hi. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So the Supreme Court is or at least the Republicans on the Supreme Court are completely out of control. I wrote an op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com titled From Oaths to Lies, the GOP's Supreme Court Coup. And they gave king-like powers to the president to break the law and have immunity from prosecution as long as he calls it an official act. I mean, that's literally rewriting Article 2 of the Constitution from 1789. They signed the death warrant for agencies that protect our air, water, food, drugs, and workplace. That dates back to 1887 when the Interstate Commerce Commission was created. They gutted the 14th Amendment's requirement put into place in 1868 that no person who's engaged in an insurrection or rebellion can hold public office. They rewrote the National Firearms Act of 1934 to allow AR-15s with a bump stock to become fully automatic weapons. It's nuts. It goes on from there. You can read the whole piece at HartmannReport.com. But Congress really needs to hold this Supreme Court to account. Check it out.
Morning light breaks through, a fresh start anew, another day to seize with a clear view.
Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour here on Middays with Mark. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks for taking my call, and how everyone's doing. I hope everyone is in good health. I was calling about, it seems to me that Kamala is still trying to take that high road as opposed to going to the gutter with Donald Trump and his supporters. But I understand that some of us would like to see her be more forceful on the message that they are putting out against her, because they keep coming after her. So my concern is that if they don't show any backbone, as people would say, against the brutality of Trump and his supporters, people would get, a little disappointed in the fact that, I saw her come out to the people that was protesting her, but every time Trump says something derogatory about her, I don't see the response as well as I would like to see it. So I don't know if that's a good tactic. What do you think?
Yeah, Tyrone. So often the candidate will have a slightly different tack than others, and even the vice presidential candidate will take on a more aggressive role. And I think we're seeing Tim Walz do that in a very upper Midwestern, almost folksy way, which is very helpful. I think the way he coined weird, talking about Republicans, has caught a lot of fire, and it's very true because look, J.D. Vance is pretty weird, and Donald Trump is pretty weird, and we can talk about things in that way. So for her to do what she's doing right now is working quite well. She's up in those swing states that we need to win. I'm sure she'll pivot as she needs to, but I think the formula seems to be working right now. People are enthused like I've never seen, and I've been through a lot of parts of my state in the last several weeks, and I'll tell you, if we keep this up, we're in a really good place for November. So, Tyrone, I'm a little less concerned as long as we've got other people doing what you want them to do.
Chuck, in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. I just retired after 35 years of teaching high schools AP history and government, and I live in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and I think the best thing I can do for this campaign is to register college kids at southern Wisconsin campuses, and I'm having no luck with anybody in the Wisconsin Democratic Party. If you have any ideas on who I could contact to spend my September and October up there, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing I'd say is contact WisDems. I mean, we have a lot of folks on the Biden campaign right now because we are a swing state. So sometimes it's just who's getting the message and how they're doing all this. And I can't tell you all that because I'm not obviously working for the party. But you're right. I mean, you've got Parkside in Kenosha. You've got UW-Whitewater. It would probably might even be a little closer to you than Parkside. And those campuses are going to be really important. In Wisconsin 3, the western part of Wisconsin, Derek Van Orden is the incumbent Republican. He was an insurrectionist who got elected to Congress. And that district has 6 UW campuses. So a lot of students can get out to vote to make sure Tammy Baldwin stays in the Senate, to defeat Derek Van Orden, and to make sure that Harris Walz win in November. So I like your idea. I would just, my best advice is to reach out to the party.
Ben Wickler is the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party right now, right? He's been on the show a number of times. Is he accessible? Can people reach out to him?
Yeah, I mean, right now I know he's on the road. I've actually been texting with him today. He does a great job.
He does.
In fact, what's interesting, Tom, just a quick aside, we had when the Biden campaign back in March announced 100 offices opened in the 6 swing states. What they didn't tell you was 47 of them were in Wisconsin, and what they also didn't tell you, 45 pre-existed the Biden campaign because of Ben.
Wow. Yeah, Ben is great. I remember him from like 15 years ago. Louise and I were in his kitchen, and we were like, who's this kid? He's got so much energy. That was with John Nichols. Anyhow, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Middays with Mark. We'll be back with more of your calls for him on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Don't touch that dial. Your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan coming right up.
University Book Club today. We're reading Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe. Jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, "You have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call," I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners on the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The whole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction, the disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nation simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it, and then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book, Locked Down, Locked Out by Maya Shen.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
Every day's an opportunity to do something good.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan for the hour. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Randy in Huntington Beach, California. You are on the air with Representative Pocan.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. I grew up in what many people refer to as a Chicago suburb, but where many people like the congressman and I, we know it better as Milwaukee. We were close enough to Chicago that we routinely read about the politics of Cook County, Illinois, where the dead routinely voted for years after they died. The joke was vote early and vote often. Now, thankfully, that's been cleaned up, but I'm here today to tell your listeners, Tom, how to vote early and vote often and do so legally. Now, voting early is really simple. With mail-in ballots, you can vote sometimes a month in advance of the election. So if you break both your arms or become brain damaged or die, your vote will still count.
Yeah, I appreciate the PSA,
Voting
Randy,
often,
but do you have a question for Congressman Pocan?
Well, what I'm trying to do is get people more involved in the election.
Okay, well, that's a noble thing. Norm in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Norm, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Sure. How you doing there, Tom?
Good.
Listen, I want to ask the Congressman Pocan about what are you going to do about the failure of the CDC? And there's an interesting book that talks about this called The Greed to Do Good, The Untold Story of CDC's Disastrous War on Opioids. In other words, they claim that, and we've been writing about this and stuff, and this book appears in Pain News Network, and it says that this opioid crisis is nothing but the whole guidelines and everything is nothing but a flawed false or farce, and in fact, it has led to the arrest of many innocent doctors, and patients are suffering or not being able to get treated.
Yeah, we've had a lot of calls over the years, Norm, from people who have like lifelong pain, and for whom addiction really would not be an issue. The pain is the issue,
right?
And they can't get their medication. Thanks for raising the question, Congressman. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I mean, CDC, there's a brand new director, and I think she's doing a really great job. But
I don't think it's the CDC. I think it's actually the DEA that has been leading this charge, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, and then the FDA on some of the alternatives on pain medication, that are more maybe herbal or holistic. But I think what I would probably try to say is there's a problem with the pharmaceutical companies in this area when they knew that they had addictive products and didn't disclose it, and they barely got a slap on the hand in many cases. And I'm not going to forget those folks. I think
the Sacklers are living large.
Exactly, and yet that's where we should probably have a more aggressive policy.
There you go. Dave in Del Mar, Maryland. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Pocan, and you also, Tom. Great to talk to you. Long-time listener, second-time caller.
Thank you.
I want to discuss the immigration issue. Previous caller said, well, we can't accept everybody and all and put a limit and whatever. If you've ever toured this country, this is a great land. It's expansive. There's a lot of room. It only helps to stimulate our economy, the more people we have. Not necessarily to be number one, that's whatever. But here's the issue that may stimulate the right. If it's not true with immigration, let's just dismantle the Statue of Liberty piece by piece, ship it back over to France, and say, oh, that will get their hackles up. That would stir them up just as much as changing the name of forts around the country.
So is there a question in there, Dave, or just a rant?
Yeah, a question, just a statement that the current candidates, Kamala and Congressman Waltz, are just. This election. This is going to be a landslide. Don't you think that they're on the right track?
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, no, I do. And even though I served in Congress with Tim Walz, he's governor of Minnesota, so I want to make sure we're giving him the proper title because he's done some really magnificent things. I think that's why he's currently the vice presidential nominee, because of what he got done in Minnesota. But I think watching the energy in the last few weeks has been astounding. I mean, the turnaround that people feel about our chances for fall, watching the polls in swing states, and watching Donald Trump crumble. He doesn't know how to handle this. You know, he's not leading the news cycle with his absurdities that he does and usually controls the media so well. So I feel like, you know, we're in a good place, but this is going to be a close election no matter what, especially in certain states. And we just all have to make this the final sprint to November.
Vince in Seattle. Hey, Vince, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, how's it going? So I wanted to talk about something that maybe isn't necessarily as important as everything else that's going on, but LED headlights are insanely bright these days, and I think they're a huge hazard. And I was just wondering if maybe you or other members of Congress would be open to legislation that would limit the lumen output of those headlights, or maybe require some kind of automatic dimmer system. That's pretty much it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Vince. I'm not well versed in this issue, so I'd have to have more information to tell you. I know that we have plenty of agencies that are looking out for the safety of folks in this area, but I'll do a little dive and see what I can find out.
Bill in Etheridge, Tennessee. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Mr. Pocan. I talked to you a few months ago about Donald Trump being able to run for president as a felon. I don't know if you remember talking to me or not, but the reason I'm calling today, first off, I just listened to the man about the pain medication. I beat my body to death for most of my life, worked like a rented mule, and enjoyed every minute of it. But they sure are tough on us when it comes to trying to help us with pain. And if something could be done there, that'd be great. But the main reason I called is I've had an idea for years now that if the federal government would fund a program for homeowners or even small business owners that want to contribute to helping climate change, to put the money up for a solar system or wind towers or whatever, enough to power an average home or their home, and then they continue to pay their electric bill like they always would, and it would go back to the government, and in the end the government wouldn't cost the government a dime, but we would have a World War II effort to help combat climate change, because I believe it is the greatest enemy we've got right now.
That's essentially what they did in Germany, Bill. Congressman, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act is our biggest push by the federal government to try to help on this front, and I think we got to be open to multiple ways to up our use of renewables and get off of our addiction to fossil fuels. So, Bill, I appreciate the idea. If I can, Tom, just a quick aside on, this is the birthday of Social Security today, 89 years old.
That's right.
And, one of the things I think is important is what Bill was just talking about. In a lot of jobs, your body is pretty tired when you get to be in your 60s, when you get close to retirement. The Republican Study Committee, the largest, group that works on policy in the Republican caucus in the House, has proposed raising the retirement age from 67 to 69. The problem is your body, in many cases, in many jobs, can't keep up with that. So I just want to remind people, as we're celebrating Social Security, something we all pay into, but benefits us later in life, that there are some in Congress that want to turn on their backs to that promise. And someone like Bill in particular, who has used his body heavily in labor through the years, it just doesn't make sense for many people, and I think it's important to remind people of that.
Yeah, and let's not forget that in 1980 you could actually retire on Social Security in most parts of the United States, and then Reagan changed the formula for the COLAs, for the cost of living adjustments, and now it's pretty hard in a lot of places. And he also made Social Security benefits taxable, and he also raised the retirement age from 65 to 67. This is what Republicans do. They don't like Social Security. They've been calling it socialism and a Ponzi scheme ever since 1935. So, yeah. All righty, Gregory in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I had a question about 3 federal congressional swing districts. I'll try to run the primary results now real quick, and then my question. The Washington 3rd, which is just north of Tom in Washington State, the California 40th, and the California 45th in Orange County, California. The primary in Washington State, the incumbent is a Democrat, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. She's, I believe, an auto mechanic by trade. She got 46% in the primary, and the MAGA Republican Joe Kent came in at 39, and another Republican at 12. So they combined for about 52%. And the other 2 are swing districts, not Katie Porter's, but the 40th, Young Kim is the Republican incumbent. It was a Democrat-held seat in the 2018 to 20 cycle, and Kim won 56% in this California primary. And the last one's the 45th. Michelle Steele is the Republican incumbent. She got 55% in the recent primary. And the Democrats, Derek Tran won with 16%, and 3 other Democrats.
Gregory, what's your question?
My question is, what is the DCC and the Progressive Caucus doing to support the challengers in California and the incumbent in Washington State?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take it a little broader because I think I might bore people if I focus on 3 districts when there's probably a good 30 districts that we're looking at. 20 is pickup opportunities, maybe even a little more than that. Another 20 of protecting some incumbents, like you mentioned, in Washington State. But they're doing a lot. I'm really happy with the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee's efforts this cycle. I didn't say that last cycle, I'll be honest. This cycle, I think they've been doing a really extraordinary job. And they're active in a lot of races, including in Wisconsin 3. Becca Cook just won the primary yesterday against Derek Van Orden, who's an insurrectionist in Congress. They've already, House Majority PAC has made a significant buy there. And I think they're doing that in many of these districts. The unique thing about what you just brought up, Gregory, is in California and Seattle, and the numbers can be a little skewed because they're jungle primaries. And what that means is you could have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans against each other, and it comes down to final 2, not as one person's a Democrat winning the primary, one's a Republican. So sometimes those numbers in primaries are a little hard to look at and translate in the same way we do most elections. But the shorter answer is I think the D-Trip's doing a really good job this cycle.
That's great news. I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that from you, from a member of Congress and a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. It's 47 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us here for the hour, taking your calls. Former chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be right back with your calls for Representative Pocan. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. James in Hollywood, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Tom's still the smartest man in media, and Mr. Pocan, thank you so much for your stand on Gaza. I need to know what else you can do and what can be done. Netanyahu is a modern-day Hitler. He wants to make Gaza uninhabitable, unlivable, deliberately turned our sacred chamber into cheerleaders for genocide. He's deliberately targeting pregnant women and children and starving. Anyhow, would you please tell the people, I know the Republican leader, Speaker of the House, gave rules that you would be arrested if you said anything. And thank you much.
I don't know about that. I know that, obviously when Netanyahu came, many of us didn't go. In fact, the majority of the Democrats didn't show up. I think it is concern about Netanyahu not really representing the Israeli people, but really protecting himself, trying to keep himself out of jail. But what he's done in Gaza may make him a war criminal, right? I mean, the fact that I think almost every single person has been relocated at some point in Gaza multiple times in some cases, the fact that you've basically destroyed Gaza and it has to be rebuilt all over again, I think there is some intention in that. And in reality, they had a right to respond to Hamas on the attack on October 7th. They have a right to try to get the hostages, but you don't have a right to kill women and children and non-combatants in the way that they have and destroy Gaza in the way that they have. And I think that's the problem. Again, I think with a new generation of leaders, we have a different way we look at the Middle East. We appreciate allies, but at the same time, I don't appreciate a friend who may do something that's not in their or our best interest, and we need to speak out more. And I think more in Congress are. So that's the good news, James. I think we're on a good direction right now with more people than ever.
Congressman, I was talking to a friend of mine in Israel last weekend, and he said, what would you have done differently with regard to, after October 7th? How should Israel have responded? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, specifically go after Hamas. We know that surgically they went after Hamas leaders in Lebanon with drones and things and didn't have to cause the damage that they did in Gaza. Mm-hmm. But the damage in Gaza was intentional. It was a collective punishment of the Palestinian people who live there. And it's obvious by the 40,000 people, of which 70% are women and children, that are dead because of the actions they did. So I think they would have had far more favor in the world community going after the people who are responsible, Hamas, which is maybe 30,000 people, 40,000 at most, not 2.3 million people. And the way that they've conducted this has turned, I think, really people realize that the human rights of Palestinians has been non-existent for people in Gaza in the way Benjamin Netanyahu has conducted his war.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a challenge when they're hiding in tunnels and even under hospitals. I get that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to hit a break here in 4 seconds. So Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a second. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. Stay tuned. We will be right back in 60 seconds with more of your calls for Representative Pocan. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. Everybody's all excited about how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing so well in the polls, and there's so much energy around the Democratic candidacy, and that's great. And we need to keep that up. And Trump seems to be going down in flames, the fat Elvis phase of his life or his career. But it's important to realize that over $6 billion has been raised so far in dark money from mostly right-wing billionaires and big corporations, and none of it has been spent yet. September, October, it's coming. There's a tsunami of dark money coming, and we need to get ready for it. And the big way to get ready for it is to double down on registering people to vote, phone banking, sending out postcards, talking to neighbors and friends, getting the word out, because it's gonna come down to people. It's going to come down to people power. There's a whole article about this called "Will Democracy Survive the Tsunami of Dark Right-Wing Money Coming This Fall?" over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Turn the dial, tune in, and you'll find a voice of reason for the open mind.
53 minutes past the hour. Welcome back here on Lefty Talk Radio. Gene in Madison, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Mark. Happy birthday. My question is October's coming, and I own a small rehab agency in Greene and Rock County that we do nursing homes and outpatients. Every year we get the notice that Medicare is going to cut reimbursement for physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Is there any way we can get this trend to stop? Because our costs keep going up, and they keep decreasing our reimbursement?
Yeah, Gene, we get this on a lot of different in medical areas on this, and I wish I had a better answer for you other than I've seen this since I've been there 12 years. They come and then we have to fight back, and they have a comment period, and we try to go through this. I mean, at the end of the day, what we need is a comprehensive, I think, Medicare for All system where we actually fund it. We actually cover things like dental, vision, and hearing. We actually do provide that universal coverage that every other industrialized nation has but the United States, and then you don't have to have this nickel and diming that we see and that you're going through and you put time into rather than doing the mission of what you're trying to do in healthcare. I wish I had a better answer other than I've seen this so often. We just need to reform our healthcare system in a more comprehensive way.
And today's your birthday too, in addition to Medicare? Hey, happy birthday.
Yeah, the big 6-0, Tom.
There you go. Well, that was a good year for me. I hope you enjoy it. Tony in Tampa, Florida, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, hello. I have a question. When Trump loses this election and tells all his mega people to rise up, how are we preparing for this? And Trump would like nothing more than a civil war in this country. We know this. He's been through it before.
And apparently so would Elon Musk.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I have a glimmer of hope on this in that I'm watching comments from people like Nikki Haley and some others right now who are criticizing Donald Trump, which, never happens because it's not allowed, but he's in a scramble right now. He doesn't seem to know how to respond to the Harris-Walz ticket. And I think there will be enough people who are tired of Donald Trump and they want to rise within the Republican Party that if he doesn't win, I'm not sure he'll have people having his back in the same way. And don't forget, the problem last time was how do you get him out of the White House after he lost the election? This time, there's no one to get out of the White House if he loses the election. So it's a little different scenario, but I do have some glimmers of hope I'm watching that there may be enough Republicans who want to turn the page, even if it's for personal gain, but it gets us past this really, I think, terrible dark period of Donald Trump in this country.
Congressman, we just have 40 seconds here. I'm curious your thoughts on what we should be paying attention to in the coming weeks and what you're expecting to happen.
Yeah, next week is the Democratic Convention, so that'll be interesting to watch and see.
I'll be there.
You will? Oh, I'll be there too, Tom. I look forward to seeing you.
We'll be broadcasting live from the SiriusXM booth, so drop by anytime you want. I'll just pop you on the air.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Love to. So I think we're going to keep hearing more and more about the race. We're dominating the media cycle instead of Donald Trump, which is unusual. And I think that's good for us. So let's just keep doing everything we can between now and November.
Yeah. And there's a lot to do. I mean, let's not mistake that. There is a lot to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and looking forward to, the next week. I think it's going to add a lot of extra enthusiasm even beyond what we have with this ticket.
There you go. Congressman, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Always great having you with us. Congressman Mark Pocan, pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. We'll be back on the other side of this break. My colleague Dean Obeidallah is going to drop by and share with you some really startling thoughts. This is pretty amazing. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We
Today's book in our book club is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, by this guy, Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using three simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race, or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for brown Arab in GOP speak, and immigration, aka brown people from south of our border, and socialism. Meanwhile, Republican secretaries of state across the nation are vigorously purging voters from the rolls. Over 17 million, more than 10% of America's active voters, in just the 2016-2018 period, according to NBC News. After the 5 Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, 14 GOP-controlled states moved within a year, some within days, to restrict access to the vote, particularly for communities of color, students, and retired people. In North Carolina, for example, 158 polling places were permanently closed in the 40 counties with the most African-American voters just before the 2016 election, leading to a 16% decline in African-American early voting in that state. An MIT study found that nationwide, Hispanic voters wait 150% longer in line than white voters, and black voters can expect to wait 200% longer in line to vote. In Indiana, then Governor Mike Pence's new rigorous voter ID law caused an 11.5% drop in African-American voting. Students are suing for their right to vote, and retired people who no longer drive but care passionately about their Social Security and Medicare are being turned away at the polls by the hundreds of thousands because their driver's licenses have expired. The obvious failure of 40-plus years of Reaganomics and GOP policies to maintain a functional middle class in America has been a problem for the modern GOP. In 1974, for example, the GOP had outright control of only 7 states. The message, elect us and we'll help the rich people, just didn't generally resonate with American voters. It's the reason why, outside of the fluke elections of 46 and 52, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives outright for 3 generations, from 1933 to 1996, and controlled the Senate for most of that time. Desperate to win the presidency for the GOP in 1968, Richard Nixon went so far as to commit treason by torpedoing a peace deal with President Lyndon Johnson that President Lyndon Johnson had worked out with the North and South Vietnamese. According to Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, then president of Iran, Ronald Reagan did the same thing by cutting a deal with Iran whereby they would hold on to the U.S. embassy hostages until after the 1980 presidential election, torpedoing Jimmy Carter's chances of re-election. But in 2000, the GOP changed tactics. After Reagan was almost busted for his part in Iran-Contra, he testified that he had forgotten about details of the program more than 80 times. His growing Alzheimer's spared him an indictment. They realized that getting busted for treason wasn't worth the risk. They needed a plan B, and it was deliciously simple. If most voters don't like what you're selling, then just don't let them vote. Paul Weyrich promoted this idea back in 1980 when he was campaigning for Reagan after co-founding the Heritage Foundation. And indeed, many Republican luminaries, such as William Rehnquist, who went from serving the GOP by standing in polling places and intimidating Hispanic and Native American voters in the 1960s to becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, rose up through the ranks by participating in Republican-run voter intimidation schemes. Voter suppression became the foundational go-to tactic for the GOP in 2000. Although the GOP attacked Democratic presidential nominee Al Gore with smear and innuendo, ridiculing him for helping write the legislation that created the modern internet, for example, the main thing that got George W. Bush into the White House was voter suppression. His brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Bush's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, threw somewhere between 20,000 and 90,000 African-American voters off the rolls. They were able to get the vote close enough. The 5 Republican appointees to the Supreme Court functionally awarded Bush the presidency. The BBC covered this in 2001 in 2 major investigative reports that were seen all over the world, except on any American media. By 2016, the Republican Party had fine-tuned its voter suppression and intimidation systems to the point that they ran like well-oiled machines in nearly 30 states. Between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, for example, Ohio had purged more than 2 million voters from its rolls, the vast majority, more than 2 to 1, in heavily African-American and Hispanic counties. The 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court ruled in 2017 that they could keep it up. And other states have since adopted their new tactic of caging voters. The book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, by me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Dean Obeidallah, my SiriusXM colleague. His show is available on the Progress channel, where you can hear me right now, radio channel 127 from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Dean Obeidallah, DeanARadio.com is his website. He's got an amazing Substack newsletter. In fact, today's is particularly incredible. Tim Walz actually did go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then he worked in Congress to help veterans. You can find it at deanobeidallah.substack.com, or just go over to substack.com and in the little search part there, plug in Dean's Report, and you will find it. Dean, welcome back to the program. It's so great to have you with us.
Thanks, my friend.
Yeah, tell us about this. I want to start, well, first of all, today's piece is worthy of a conversation on its own. Tell us about Tim Walz actually going to Afghanistan and Iraq during a war.
The corporate media are sheep, Tom, as we know, and that they all go in one direction without using this thing called Google. Now, in reality, I had Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison on my show Monday. He comes in every month. He's my buddy. We're both Muslims. He's my buddy. And he said he served in the house with Walz. And what people don't know is that Tim Walz, on his own, went to Iraq and Afghanistan as a member of Congress in his first term. So I Googled it. I found articles from 2007 and 8 in the Minnesota papers. So my article is based on that he didn't go because he was deployed. He went because he chose to go, because he wanted to talk to the soldiers there and see what more they need. And he came back, and for his 12 or 13 years in Congress, made fighting for women and men of our armed services and the veterans his number one priority. That's all he did. That was his main obligation. So he didn't stop serving when he left the National Guard in 2005. He has never stopped serving our nation, and he never stopped serving the people he served with in the National Guard, and since then in Congress. So it documents a lot of his work in the National Guard, where he was stationed, where he served, what he did. What's also not getting covered, 2005, he had to have surgery for damage to his eardrums from the artillery fire from working in the National Guard. So he actually had to have medical surgery done, and that's shortly before he retired from the National Guard. He's 41 years old.
Yeah. And just to clarify for everybody what we're talking about here, these scurrilous attacks against him. 5 years ago, I believe, in 2019, he was talking to a group of constituents when he was in Congress about how we need to get weapons of war off the streets. And he just made this offhand comment like, I carried weapons of war when I went to war, and what he meant was when I was in the military, because he didn't actually serve in a war zone. He misspoke. But that was one word in one comment that he said once 5 years ago. It's not like, Donald Trump, bragging about stuff that hasn't happened, that never happened over and over and over and over again. And Tim and J.D. Vance then comes along and goes, oh, yeah, this is stolen valor. He's lying for political gain. And he keeps repeating these lies about Tim Walz, and it's just reprehensible. It's just disgusting.
It is. And also, J.D. Vance said that Tim Walz abandoned his troops and didn't go to Iraq. So they had one part of it was a lie that Tim Walz said you're going to go to Iraq. I'm not going to go. Tim Walz actually put his retirement papers in before his unit got a notice that they were actually going to go to Iraq.
Right.
Tim Walz could have retired at 20 years. He re-enlisted and stayed 4 more years because of 9/11, because he wanted to serve his nation. And he was sent to Europe during Operation Enduring Freedom to do support for the troops who were actually in Afghanistan fighting at the time. And they thought they were going to get shifted over to Afghanistan. They didn't, but they were there. He was there for 10 months away from his family.
Yep.
He was sent many times. He was deployed to Norway, to the Arctic Circle, and other places, sacrificing time away from his family. It is despicable that J.D. Vance, who did serve 4 years, and that's honorable, but in the time that Tim Walz was in Congress serving, helping our veterans, there's J.D. Vance hanging out with Silicon Valley billionaires like Peter Thiel, hanging out, hobnobbing with them so they can make him millions of dollars and then bankroll his campaign for the Senate ultimately years later.
Yeah. Now, the newsletter of yours that really blew my mind was 2 days ago, August 12th, the Dean's Report. And again, if you don't subscribe, it's free. If you don't subscribe to the Dean's Report, yeah, you need to get over to Substack and plug in Dean's Report and get it up, because you just do such a good job with this, Dean.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
But anyhow, the headline is Trump's attacks on VP Harris's crowd size are far more sinister than many grasp. And I hadn't, done the thinking behind the thinking here, and you did, and it just blew my mind. Lay this out for us. What's the premise?
Sure, and I will say this, that Bernie Sanders yesterday, apart from me, put out a statement to the same effect of my article from Monday. So Bernie's came out a day later, we're both friends with Bernie, who said that Trump is lying, and it's the same thing I'm saying. Trump is lying about this idea that Vice President Harris is not getting the crowd. It's not just about his ego. He's laying the groundwork to deny that she's going to win the election. When she wins, he's going to say she didn't even get crowds. And it's the same idea that, remember in 2020, he would say about Biden, trying to appeal to his base, how could Biden beat me? He didn't get big crowds at the events. I did. Biden was not, with small amounts of people. Well, now Vice President Harris is getting even bigger crowd size. So what he's doing is trying to delegitimize that, to ultimately delegitimize the election results when he loses. And then, as we know, paving the way, like an ISIS recruiter, to radicalize his supporters, becoming another act of violence. It is beyond me, Tom, that this man is allowed to run for president, that he's not in a prison cell. I don't think you'll find another first-world democracy where a man can attempt a coup, incite a terrorist attack on their capital, and then walk freely and be able to run for president 4 years later. What a failing of the Department of Justice in not responding quickly and arresting Donald Trump early on, right after he left office.
Oh, yeah.
But my point is that he's laying the groundwork for another January 6th. He's going to lose. He knows that, and that means he's going to end up spending the last days of his life in a prison cell. He is far more dangerous than 2020. It's not about winning or losing. It's about his liberty for the last days of his life. And he will end up in a prison cell. He will die there. I don't mean killed, but he will spend his unnatural life in a prison cell. That's where he belongs, and that's where he's heading.
Well, and I think that's the reason why when he was on Elon Musk, over on Twitter or X or whatever this increasingly Nazified platform is called, he said explicitly, if this election goes the wrong way, I think that was the phrase he used, then I'm moving to Venezuela. And I know that you're a keen observer of what's going on in politics in this hemisphere, and I don't think a lot of Americans realize. Most Americans just don't follow what's going on. But in Venezuela, Maduro just did what Trump tried to do on January 6th.
Absolutely, and you have a lot of countries, including not just the U.S. but even allies in Latin America, saying the election there was illegitimate. But what Donald Trump is doing, and let me say this as a lawyer, Donald Trump is signaling his intent to flee the jurisdiction. And I really think that should be an issue for the federal judge, Judge Chutkan, in terms of potentially expanding conditions on his bail. Like, he didn't have to post bail financially, but there are conditions of his bail. I think in Georgia, where he had to post $200,000 of bail, they should be worried as well. If Donald Trump loses, he will likely, I'm not saying definitely, but likely flee the jurisdiction. And they should be aware of that. They should impose new conditions, either higher bail, take away his passport, whatever it takes. Because this guy's going to run. He's going to run. He's going to flee. And it's going to be like The Fugitive, where instead of Richard Kimball, we're looking for Donald J. Trump.
Well, even if they took away his passport, he owns a jet. He owns a 757, which is capable of flying from New York to Caracas nonstop, I believe. and if not, with one hop. So how do you? I mean, could Judge Chutkan lock down his plane?
I think we get a lot of F-16s out there. I think if you have to not shoot the plane down, but make it guided down to the ground so you can't have a felon who attempted a coup flee the jurisdiction, you could do that. What could she really do?
Boy, we could write a hell of a script for a movie here, couldn't we?
Let's do it. This would be great. I know what the ending I want to happen. That's a different story. But we can just run backwards from the ending that I want to see happen. Look, I don't know if they're going to up it or not, but you have a guy who is a convicted felon. He'll be sentenced next month. He has pending federal charges in D.C. In the case and classified document case, almost 99% is going to get reinstated. And he's got the Georgia case still pending. He is saying if he loses, he's going to flee the jurisdiction. He said that. We didn't say it. He said if things go horribly, we're going to have coffee in Venezuela because it's safer there. Yeah, safer for you because you won't get prosecuted. Not safe for the people around you. So, look, that's a very jarring statement. Anyone else is out on bail and says that, Tom, again, he's getting special treatment. Anyone else on bail says that, they're going to probably be taken. They might get their bail revoked.
For sure. And we have no extradition treaty with Venezuela, which Trump is obviously aware of. And Musk was just going along with it. Dean, I have 2 minutes here before I hit a hard break. Help me with some of my research. I want to write a piece about what happens to the GOP after Trump loses, because I see, three possible directions for it. I'm curious your thoughts on that, if you don't mind my picking your brain.
Sure. I mean, you can look historically what happens to parties, the Know Nothing Party, the Whig Party. If you want to look back there, when those parties, they fractured and they just faded away. I don't think that'll happen. I think the GOP will keep its name, and perhaps more of the, I'm not going to say sane Republicans will take control, or, Tom, it just continues on this route. It just continues to be the white nationalist far-right party. Like in Europe, they have good elections and bad elections. AfD in Germany. I mean, they just continue on their line. Look at in Italy, the party that won the power there, Giorgia Meloni, has its essence from the fascist parties. So, and they're not truly a fascist now. I mean, they actually have some socialist tendencies. But my point is, I think it could remain a far-right party in American history, and maybe a more centrist Republican Party emerges that is more about low taxes, helping companies, that kind of stuff, like the old GOP. Perhaps it's more likely that happens, and this one fades. It's a hard thing to say.
Yeah, but kind of the Reagan GOP, basically, the pro-oligarchy party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're living through an oligarchy now. I've never been more disappointed with big money in politics as we're seeing right now. It is so treacherous. And the AIPAC money, millions spent to silence people. And it's not just them. It's the Republican super PAC donors, these billionaires and oligarchs from Wall Street pumping in millions and millions to help Donald Trump. And even there's some on the left. And while we might cheer they're helping us, ultimately it's destructive and corrosive to our democracy. It should be all banned. There should be no super PACs.
And you can thank 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court in 2010 and 6 Republicans, this last year. It's just a tip. It's not a bribe. and corporations are people, my friend. The great Dean Obeidallah, the Dean's Report. Go to Substack.com and plug in Dean's Report. Check it out, or deanobeidallah.substack.com. Dean, thanks so much for dropping by. It's always such a...
Have fun at DNC.
There you go.
Hopefully we'll get you on. We're here in the DNC. I'm going to be back in New York.
That'll be a hoot.
Designated survivor.
Okay.
So I'll be back in New York.
Thanks, Dean.
Take care.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Barry in Martinsville, Virginia. Hey, Barry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? I got just a few things I want to say. I'm 64 years old. I became woke when Ronald Reagan laid off those air traffic controllers. That's how long I've been
Welcome
woke.
to the club.
Now, 2 things I want to point out is what y'all was just talking about these rich folks. Most people, if they don't realize this, the money that they are spending and using against us, that's the money that they siphon out of us over the last 40 years through the subprimes, the too big to fail the hedge funds, all of that. That's our money, our progressive money that should have bettered our lives, that they are using now against us. And my other point is, no matter what happens, and I hope we win, the Democrats, Kamala and Tim Walz, I hope we win, but they have got to do something about bringing these rich people down off the peg they got, because they just got too much power, and none of us is ever going to be safe in this country with these rich people having the kind of money and power that they have.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you, Barry. And you know, we used to have two protections against what's going on right now. The first was there were strong limits on outside money in politics. Most of these came in 74, 75 as a result of the scandal around the Agnew and then the Nixon bribery scandals. But you know, we cleaned up politics substantially, and then 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court came in and blew that up, saying in '76 that billionaires could fund super PAC or PACs, and in '78 saying that corporations are people and they can participate in elections on a fairly unlimited basis. And then in 2010, you know, the Clarence Thomas being the deciding vote, where 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that bribery is now illegal if you're bribing politicians or judges. And then, you know, that was one. And then the other thing that was, you know, kind of regulated rich people in the United States was we had a 90% top income tax bracket. And what that did was, you know, after you took $2-3 million out of your company, you just didn't take any more money because you had to pay 90% income tax on it. So why bother? And the result of that was that rich people kept money in their businesses and used that money to develop new products, expand the business, and pay their employees well. And that produced the middle class. And really the first middle class in the history of the world in the 1940s, where more than half of Americans joined the middle class. And then, you know, but since Reagan, we've gone from 53%, 54% of Americans being in the middle class down to 43% right now, because we dropped that top tax rate because Reagan gutted the unions. And I mean, it's just, and because the Supreme Court said you can bribe politicians. So, you know, it's a hell of a mess, Barry, and it's all brought to you courtesy of Republicans in Congress and Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, I know all that, but here's the thing, you know, these people right now, I think every time I hear about all this money, that this $6 billion that they've got together with Musk and all these people, I think, you know, if 20 years ago, that money would have gone for me to buy me a second house.
Yep.
Or
yeah, they took
my money.
Yeah, you're right. They made their money off us. I mean, the consumers of America are also the voters of America, and they're the ones. You know, rich people by and large get rich by making money off average people. Barry, thank you. Well said. It's 22 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So J.D. Vance recently went off on this rant about how Kamala Harris isn't grateful for America. It's really code. I mean, you know, when a white guy talks about black people not being grateful, you know what he's talking about. It's code for, particularly a woman. What he's really saying is, oh, she's not sufficiently deferential to the white power structure, to wealthy white men like me, J.D. Vance. But it's even worse than that. I mean, he and Ted Cruz wrote a letter to Javier Becerra, the HHS secretary, demanding that police have access to girls' and women's menstrual and reproductive health records. I mean, they are gung-ho to criminalize being female in this country. He also wants to do away with no-fault divorce. He also said that there should be no exceptions for rape or incest. He says 2 wrongs don't make a right. I got the whole thing. It's all laid out, all the quotes and all the links over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
It's like a battlefield. With lines drawn in the sand and shields that never yield. It's always us against them in this endless fight. But in the clash of colors, We lose the shades of right. The media makes it my team, your team. But there's more to see in the American dream.
Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind today? And how are you listening to us, George? WCPT?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, okay. So what's up?
Well, one quick point before I get to my question. You've educated us quite well over the past year or so on how important the idea of the Ukraine being an past, present, and future portion of Greater Russia, as far as Russians in general and Putin in particular is concerned. I mean, this is deeply ingrained in their politics and their culture. And I think that this may have played a role in the selection of the Kursk region for the Ukrainians to launch their attack into Russia. There was a gigantic tank battle in World War II in Kursk when the Germans were making their last attempt to stem the Russians from pushing them back. And the Russians won a great victory. This is something that every Russian is well aware of. This was the largest tank battle in history up until the first Gulf War.
Really?
So I'm sure that the Ukrainians made the decision to go based on the strategy and tactics of the situation in that area.
So it's like an iconic region. That's amazing.
But this culturally and politically to the Russians, this is a very important place. And for the Ukrainians to kick in the door and take over a chunk of it has to be absolutely humiliating to the Russians. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But the question I'd hoped to ask the congressman was based on an article that was in the Chicago Tribune on Monday, that the Republican majority in the House of Representatives passed a budget cutting the CDC's budget by 22%. We're still in the hangover of COVID, and that they're going to rip our defenses away from us, and we're having a major listeria outbreak with boar's head meats right now. How are we supposed to fight disease without a well-funded CDC?
Well, that's the thing. Republicans are like, the rich people, they can have food tasters. But the rest of us, we're on our own. George, I got to run. Thank you for the call.
9925.
It's 27 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Edmund Morgan's book, The Meaning of Independence, John Adams, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson. It's a small book. It's anecdotes of the three presidents. I think he's a little harsh on Jefferson and a little too friendly about Adams, small quibbles. But it's a fascinating look into the founders of this country. And so today I'm going to read from the chapter on George Washington. The King of England, George III, was fond of farming. His favorite diversion was to ride about his lands, chatting with the tenants about the crops. Farmer George, he called himself. His arch opponent, George Washington, had the same fondness for farming. He too enjoyed riding about his lands and talking about the crops. Indeed, there was nothing else he enjoyed quite so much. But there the likeness ceased. And among the many other matters that differentiated King George Washington from George III, none was more striking than George Washington's greater reserve and dignity. George Washington would never have taken the liberty of calling himself Farmer George, nor would he have allowed anyone else to do so. Even his friends took care to keep their distance, and those who forgot to were apt to be brought up short. A familiar anecdote, though perhaps apocryphal, well illustrates Washington's customary posture toward himself and toward others. During a meeting of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, a group of Washington's friends were remarking on his extraordinarily reserved and remote manner, even among his most intimate acquaintances. Governor Morris, who was always full of boldness and wit, had the nerve to disagree. He could be as familiar with Washington, he said, as with any of his other friends. Alexander Hamilton called his bluff by offering to provide a supper and wine for a dozen of them if Morris would, at the next reception Washington gave, simply walk up to him, gently slap him on the shoulder and say, "My dear General, how happy I am to see you look so well." On the appointed evening, a substantial number of people were already present when Morris arrived, walked up to Washington, bowed, shook hands, and then placed his left hand on Jefferson's shoulder and said, "My dear General, I am so happy to see you look so well." The response was immediate and icy. Washington reached up and removed the hand, stepped back, and fixed his eye in silence on Morris until Morris retreated, abashed, into the crowd. The company looked on in embarrassment, and no one ever tried it again. It seems a most un-American reaction, not the sort of thing that Americans like to see in the men they honor, certainly not the sort of thing one would look for in a leader of a popular revolution today. Yet Americans then and since have honored George Washington far beyond any other man in their history. Moreover, he earned the honor and his dignity and reserve. The aloofness that still separates him from us helped him to earn it. How this came about is part of the larger story of American independence, the story of how the American Revolution transformed some of the least lovable traits of a seemingly ordinary man into national assets. For besides his aloofness, Washington had other characteristics which at this distance appear less than admirable, but which served him and the nation well in the struggle for independence. Perhaps the most conspicuous of these traits, conspicuous at least in his surviving correspondence, was an unabashed concern for his own economic interest. Although Washington was fair in his dealings and did not ask favors of any man, he kept a constant, wary, and often cold eye on making a profit, ever suspicious, and not always without reason, that other men were trying to take advantage of him. Like most Virginia planters, he complained that London merchants were giving him too little for his tobacco or charging him too much for the goods he bought from them. When he rented to tenants, he demanded to be paid punctually and dismissed men's inability to meet their obligations as irresponsibility or knavery. If a man was so foolish as to try cheating him, he was capable of a fury that came through vividly in his letters, as when he wrote to one associate that, "All my concern is that I ever engaged myself in behalf of so ungrateful and dirty a fellow as you are." In operating his plantation at Mount Vernon, he inveighed endlessly against waste of time, waste of supplies, waste of money. "A penny saved is a penny got," he would say, or "many mickles make a muckle," by which he apparently meant that many small savings would add up to a larger one. Even in dealings with his mother, he was watchful, for he thought she had extravagant tastes. He was ready to supply her real wants, he said, but found her imaginary wants indefinite and oftentimes insatiable. Even after he left Mount Vernon in order to win a war and found a nation, his intense absorption with his estate persisted, somehow curiously out of place now and out of proportion to the historic events that he was grappling with. In the darkest hours of the war, and later during some of the tensest national crises, he took time to write to the managers of his plantation about making it show a profit. In early December 1776, for example, after fleeing across the Delaware with the remnants of his army, he sent home instructions to make do without buying linen for the slaves, as a price is too heavy to be borne with. And while he was president, his weekly directives to his managers far exceeded in length the documents he prepared for his subordinates in government. No detail was too small for his attention. In December 1792, while his cabinet was rent by the feud between Jefferson and Hamilton, he sent orders that Anthony's, this is one of his slaves presumably, sore toe should be examined, and if it requires it, something should be done to it. Otherwise, as usual, it will serve him as apprentice to be in the house half the winter. 3 months later, when Hamilton was under attack in the House of Representatives for alleged corruption in the Treasury Department, Washington was worried that Caroline, who was never celebrated for her honesty,
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Republicans all over the country have been doing everything they can to stop people from voting, and the real pioneer in this area has been Georgia and their Governor Brian Kemp.
He has been purging people from the voting rolls like crazy. And of course, they use this phony thing of voter fraud. There's voter fraud out there to try to make it much harder to re-register, to register in the first place, or to even vote. I mean, the mile-long lines to vote and things like that. But now they've got a new scam. They put up a website saying you can delete your voter registration here. Now, who's going to do that? I don't think anybody, but it's there. The only thing is you need to know somebody's social security number to delete their voter registration. So for a whole hour on Monday of the week that they put this thing up, for a whole hour, the entire voting database, all 6 million Georgia voters, including their social security numbers and driver's licenses, was posted publicly on that website. So now anybody can delete votes. There's a whole piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
I'm here on the airwaves, ready for the fight.
Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour, picking up your call. Well, actually, before I get to your calls, there are two quick stories I wanted to share with you, or at least, two quick stories I want to share with you here before I go any farther. Which side are you on? Miami teachers. This is bizarre. Down in Florida, Ron DeSantis pushed, and the Republicans in the legislature, it's a Republican-controlled state, they passed a law that said that if your union does not have 60%, if your workplace, if the people in your workplace, if at least 60% of the people in your workplace are not members of the union, have not joined the union, because it's a right to work for less states, so you don't have to join a union, even in a union shop. If fewer than 60% have joined the union, then the union gets decertified. And so what's happened is that thousands and thousands of union jobs have just, stopped being union jobs. Over 50,000 public employees in Florida have lost union representation as a result of this law. But here's where it gets really weird. Now, the Miami-Dade Teachers Union didn't get outright decertified because they had a threshold of at least 30% eligible members. So instead, they're being forced into a vote. And this vote right now is to choose to stay with the United Teachers of Dade County, which is an affiliate of the American Federation of Teachers, the real teachers union, or to join up with this new organization called the Miami-Dade Education Coalition, which is sponsored by a right-wing group that hates unions. Seriously. I mean, it's called the Freedom Foundation. That should tell you everything you need to know, right? And, and they're saying to the teachers, join this right-wing pseudo-union. This is wild. And I got a geeky science alert for you. Your microwave oven has its own microbiome. Seriously. Now, there are bacteria called extremophiles. These are bacteria that can live in environments like, the hot ocean vents, or, around volcanic eruptions, or in sub-zero Arctic ice, or deep in the Earth's crust where the pressure is just insane. And this new study was published in Frontiers in Microbiology just this week. And, most people think that their microwave is nice and clean because microwave radiation kills the bugs, right? Kills the bacteria. Turns out that's not the case. They swabbed a bunch of microwave ovens in households, shared large spaces, and offices, and as well as some used in laboratories, and sequenced the DNA of what they found. And what they discovered was over 101 bacterial strains growing in these microwave ovens. The main ones were Bacillus, Micrococcus, and Staphylococcus genera. Or is that genera? I'm not sure. And a few of them, the bacteria, were associated with foodborne illnesses, including Klebsiella brevundiomosis, are also growing in household microwaves. And this is wild. I mean, the team suggests that the extremophile strains they found in the microwave ovens might have been selected evolutionarily by surviving repeated rounds of radiation and could have biotechnological applications such as bioremediation of toxic waste. But for the general public, the implications of the study are simple. A microwave is not a pure, pristine place, and they recommend that you clean out your kitchen microwave just as you would scrub your kitchen surfaces to eliminate bacteria. There you go. Oh, and I just got a note from the organic wine company I love that Dominique Bosquet. This is the Veronique Raskin owns this company, and it's her family vineyard back in France.
They are not an advertiser. She's a friend, and they do great stuff. If you're into wine, I suggest checking out theorganicwinecompany.com. They have just spectacular stuff. Apropos of nothing, we just got an order, and I thought it reminded me. So, what's on your mind? Let's pick up your calls here. Daryl in Pasadena, Maryland. Hey, Daryl, thanks for listening to SiriusXM. What's up?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to know if there was a plan in place. I wanted to catch the congressman while I was there, but I was a little late coming into the queue. But I just want to know if there was a plan in place to counter that 150,000 volunteers that are going to intimidate the voters when they go to vote.
Yeah, I don't know, Daryl. That's one. There's the poll watchers, where they're going to be trying to challenge as many signatures as they can on mail-in ballots in blue cities, in red states. And they're trying to get 10,000 of them. And then they're trying to get 100,000 people to show up at polling places and basically, demand to see people's ID and otherwise intimidate people, ideally people who are, with an AR-15 strapped over their shoulders. But I honestly don't know what the Democratic response to this is or is going to be. Thanks for putting that question in my head here. As time goes on, as we get other members of Congress on, or if we can get Jamie Raskin on, or Jamie Harrison, the chair of the DNC, if we can get him back on the program, that would be a great question for him, and I'll be sure to ask it if we can get him on the program. Daryl, I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but thanks for the call. We will do our best to find out. Alan in DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, great show as always.
Thank you.
Hey, I like that segment you just gave, the Geeky Science thing about the extremophiles.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is. And you kind of wonder, if we do end up having the old nuclear annihilation, maybe it'll just be tardigrades and extremophiles.
Yeah, and cockroaches.
Who knows what eventually. Yeah, and cockroaches. Yeah, put them all in a soup and wait a billion years. See what comes out, right?
and then we'll have 6-foot-tall cockroaches developing advanced technology.
Right. Who knows, right? It's just interesting stuff. But the reason I wanted to call was that what I wanted to ask the congressman too was that. Okay, how do we get Congress to basically enforce the 14th Amendment, saying that Donald Trump is ineligible to be president because of the insurrection?
The Supreme Court already knocked that down.
They knocked it down, but only for the states to be able to enforce it, because the Section 5 does state that only Congress, through appropriate legislation, can enforce this,
right?
Which I would say that Congress already has.
It doesn't say only Congress may. It says Congress may. It gives Congress the option to write these things into law. It doesn't require them to, and which is where I think the Supreme Court was wrong.
Yes, but let's say that they're presuming that only Congress may, because it says in the Section 5 that Congress may.
Yeah.
So Congress has. They have when they formed the January 6th committee that found Trump guilty of insurrection and referred that to the Justice Department. So Congress has already done their job.
I agree.
So how do we get Congress to enforce this?
I think it would require Congress passing a law that codifies essentially, Section 3 of Article 4 of the 14th Amendment, and that's not going to happen with Mike Johnson in charge of the House. So, it would have to happen next year.
But what if someone were to say, hey, the Constitution doesn't say that Congress has to codify another law. It just says that they need to enforce this article.
Yeah.
And so therefore we're enforcing this article because we already have.
Congress, the only way that Congress can, enforce something, to use your term, is by turning it into a law. Codifying it into a law. And like I said, that's not going to happen with Tim Johnson running the House. So, but
no, that's true. But wouldn't you think that referring it to a committee which found him guilty is part of enforcement, or no? Or do you
that would be a great idea. But again, Michael Johnson, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he is not going to go along with that. The Republicans control the House of Representatives, so and Republicans control the Supreme Court right now. So that's the firewall that Trump is relying on. But I do agree with you, and I do think that Congress, if Democrats take the House, the Senate, and the White House, that Democrats really do need to pass a law putting into actual black letter law what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says. Alan, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's 44 minutes past the hour, almost 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a second. Stay with us.
You're listening to Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Right back with your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Alessandro in Washington, D.C. You are on the air. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Just curious, I'm a young professional, 27 years old, and I'm absolutely disillusioned with political discourse. I work in broadcast TV, and I have a lot of friends across the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, and many of us belong to a spiritual fellowship, and they're my political opponents, if you will. I see them as people and friends first, and we just happen to have some disagreements. But, in cable news, every day I go to work, it's just unbelievable, the vitriol, and,
You're talking Fox News, I assume. I'm not seeing much vitriol on CNN and MSNBC these days.
It's the way that we talk to each other, and it just makes me want to be politically disengaged. What do you say to? Because that's all I've known. My first election was 2016.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Republicans want. This is why they go to such extreme lengths to try to suppress the vote, to make it hard to vote, to make it hard to register to vote, to criminalize voter registration, because they don't want people participating in politics. And it's one of the reasons why the pro-Putin lefties, promote the idea that, we should just all vote for Bob Kennedy or Jill Stein, or just not vote at all, don't bother. And the pro-Putin Republicans are, promote the idea that, Democrats are all corrupt and they want to destroy the country or whatnot. I mean, this is just BS. There's some good stuff going on. Alessandro, I would encourage you to call your local Democratic Party and show up at a meeting. Become part of, it's a volunteer organization by and large, and you can even run for things like precinct committee chair. The precinct committee people are the ones who write the platform, and it's the Democratic Party platform is written, it starts locally, right? And all these local platforms get aggregated into the national platform. So number one, you would be writing the platform for the party for DC. Number two, you would be also selecting the primary candidates for DC. And number three, you would, one of the coolest things about, being a volunteer in the Democratic Party is that you're the people that your members of Congress call and visit with and meet with on a regular basis to ask for opinions. I mean, it's a position that actually has some power, some influence, and it's what's the old cliche? Be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
That's true.
That's where I would start.
My family is politically involved here, and that's a great suggestion.
Yeah. And they're looking for people, I can tell you, and Democratic parties all across the country. This is one of the biggest challenges, and particularly young people like yourself. I mean, because the last generation that was really politically engaged in a big way were the boomers, and so there's still a lot of boomers that are hanging out in Democratic circles, which isn't a terrible thing, but we really need Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y. We need young people in the party. So I look forward to a future call from you, Alessandro, where you share with us your experience. Okay?
Sure. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the call, and thanks for watching us there on YouTube. It's 48 minutes past the hour. I'll be back, or 49 it is now. I'll be back with you and picking up your calls in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. You know, all across America, families are in mourning. Their parents and grandparents, particularly the men in their lives, have been stolen from them by the right-wing hate and rage machine, particularly Fox so-called news. Jen Senko produced a movie. It's called The Brainwashing of My Dad, about losing her own father to Fox so-called news. It was also made into a book. But now comes along Tim Walz, and Tim Walz is like everybody's dad, everybody's grandpa. He's the grandpa that you wish could sit down with your grandpa who's been indoctrinated by Fox News and kind of wake him up out of the trance. He's the dad that people who grew up in dysfunctional families wish they had. He's just a normal guy. You know, he joined the Army National Guard right out of high school. He rose up to Commander Sergeant Major. He became a top advocate for America's vets. He went to college, got his master's degree, taught high school social studies. He's a good man. He smiles. His students love him. There's a whole op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Morning sun shining bright. Another day feels so right.
Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. John in Grayslake, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm 70 years old, and I've been diagnosed with bilateral throat tumor.
Ouch.
And yeah, it turns out it is cancerous. I'm undergoing, with a radiation treatment, which is, I'm in the second week. The thing is, the exploratory, what they call it, biopsy surgery they got to put you under, and all the other visits with specialists, it's $31,000. Now, the good side of it is, I have regular Medicare with a supplemental. I just got bills for the surgery and all the other stuff, about $31,000. And other than my annual deductible, $200 and something, it's paid for.
Yep.
And I have regular Medicare, not the Advantage.
Yeah.
And the only thing I have to worry about in the morning is getting well. I don't have to worry about, bills that aren't going to be paid.
Right. Whether the insurance company is going to require pre-authorization for your next treatment.
Amen. And the thing is, I just want to stress to everybody, all the seniors, don't get suckered into this Advantage. It's a scam. It's awful.
Yeah, it really is. And real Medicare is the real thing. My best friend, Jerry Schneiderman, who just passed away this last year from COVID, had throat cancer about 15, 20 years ago and went through what you're going through, John. It's no fun, but he came out on the other end healthy. I hope you do too.
Oh, I think I will. I'm kind of a health freak. I don't smoke, and I live a pretty good life. So
good. Well, I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the testimonial, John. I appreciate it. From John to John. John is in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Yeah. Hey, Tom. My question is, if 34 felon was to move to Venezuela, does he take Secret Service with him? Are we going to be screwed as taxpayers?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have any idea. I would guess if he was a fugitive from the law, which he would be, that the Secret Service would not go along with him because they would have an obligation to bring him back,
I hope so. Anyways, and then my very last question.
A wild question.
Can't Biden sign an executive order that anyone with a felon cannot run for public office?
No, that would require legislation. What's ironic is Trump lives in Florida, and in Florida, if you're convicted of a felony in Florida, you can't vote. And Trump voted in the primary today, apparently. There was a headline or a chyron that I saw on MSNBC earlier saying that Trump just early voted on, in the Florida primary. Had he been convicted in Florida rather than in New York State, he would not be allowed to vote. Isn't that wild?
That's, what? I've never seen anything like this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
The most dangerous person on the planet gets treated better than any human being.
I know, now. And not just by the political party, not just by the Republicans. He's being treated well by the press as well, which is just incredible. I mean, they're just slobbering all over him constantly. It's bizarre. John, I got to move along, but thank you for the call.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you. Steve in Minneapolis. Hey, Steve, thanks for listening to KTNF. What's up?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. Steve, I had a question about the person that said they're the 150 people, million people, or whatever, to suppress the.
Yeah.
Do these states have laws to outlaw that? That would be worth looking into. I'll take my
most states allow election observers, and they sit there as the election workers are opening the mail-in ballots, in particular, and if they think that a signature doesn't match, they call it out. And the problem is we're finding that in many states, particularly if the only person who shows up to oversee the signature match is a Republican partisan, that when they're looking at ballots that are coming from people in blue cities, they ping a lot of them. And then of course your ballot doesn't get counted. Eric in Erie, Pennsylvania. Hey Eric, what's up?
Hey, guten Tag, Herr Hartmann. You're double N. That's a Germanic ancestry, right?
Yeah, it is. Actually, it's not my family's name, but it's a long story.
Oh, okay.
But what's on your mind here?
Well, the name Drumpf, D-R-U-M-P-F, also is.
Yeah, that's German.
And our middle school schoolyard bully seems to want to try and make hay out of everybody's ancestry, the difference in their parents' ethnicity, the spelling and pronunciation of their name. So Drumpf needs to get into heavy rotation with Weird, which has been noticeably effective. And I think we can make this guy just spin out and self-destruct by needling him back the same way he gives it out.
Yeah. The thing that bothers him the most is being made fun of. And, he's coming up with these wild theories about Kamala's crowds. Eric, thanks for the call. They're deserving of ridicule. That's what makes him crazy. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active. Join your local Democratic Party. Show up, There's a lot to be done, and we got a lot of work to do here before we can sleep. So tag you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and stay safe. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
If you're a corporate employee, you know that something unpleasant is afoot when top executives are suddenly issuing statements about how committed they are to their employees, making sure that all of them are treated with dignity and respect.
Democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.